Chapter 846. Han Wennan saw that I was lost in thought and hadn't replied to him for a long time, so he couldn't help but call out to me. Hearing his call, I broke away from my thoughts and asked if there was anything else. When he saw that I was absent-minded, he didn't seem to want to say anything else, so he didn't bring up the previous question. He just said that he hadn't expected me to be so calm in my current difficult situation, which really made him admire me. However, he still reminded me to be careful, and then asked if I had a place to go. Seeing him like this made my heart warm. Although Han Wennan and I weren't as close as the fatty, and even back in the ancestral bloodline of One Mountain, he didn't dare to go against the wishes of the elders and his family and attack me. However, I also knew his situation at the time. After all these years, we've treated each other as good friends. In this current world, he was still willing to take the risk to come and inform me. This kind of friendship is really rare. Thinking about this, I suddenly had a thought. I couldn't bear to let Han Wennan get involved in the mountain and sea realms affairs. However, after thinking about it carefully, I felt helpless. This wasn't something I could control. The Nuwa stone in his body was already closely linked to this matter. I could only hope that when the time came, I would be able to protect his life. After telling him the purpose of this trip, the two of us were silent for a while. Seeing that I was so calm, Han Wennan seemed to think that I was confident in dealing with this matter. His expression relaxed a little, and he began to chat with me. He took the initiative to change the topic, so I didn't bring up the matter of the mountain and sea realm. Instead, I told him what had happened after we parted. Unfortunately, regardless of whether it was the Fire God Temple or the Medicine King Valley, everything that had happened to me was a secret that I couldn't tell Han Wennan in detail. Therefore, after chatting for a while, he could clearly hear that I was holding back, and he seemed to have lost interest in continuing the conversation. He smiled and said, "You've come a long way and must be tired. It's getting late, so you should rest early." He was asking me to leave, so I didn't say anything else. I nodded and followed him to the room he had prepared for me. After resting for a whole day, I knocked on Han Wennan's door, intending to say goodbye. He knew my current situation, so he didn't try to keep me. He just told me that if I needed his help, I should send a message as soon as possible. I didn't refuse and nodded in agreement. After bidding farewell, I got on the car and headed back to the Fire God Temple. Along the way, I kept thinking about what Han Wennan had said. Although I already have the cultivation of Yang spirit, compared to the masters of the three sects, my strength is still weak. Not to mention the three sects encirclement. Even if any one of them sent a person with the exceptional Yang spirit, I'm afraid it would be difficult for me to resist. Not to mention, there were still immortal-like existences like President Li, Celestial Master Zhang, and the ruler of Penglai. I didn't have any power to fight back against them. It was no wonder that Yi Piampian and Han Wennan were so worried and hurried over to send me a message. Since there was no way to defeat them, the only thing they could do was to protect themselves. However, there were not many places to hide in this world. Thinking about it carefully, even the Fire God Temple was not a safe place. Back then, the old president had personally gone there. If he wanted to find me, he would definitely not let go of this place. Only the Valley of the Medicine Masters and Wang Wu's cave were considered safe places. In this way, it would not hinder my plan to go to Wang Wu's cave to cultivate. But before that, no matter what, I still have to go see Yin. Half a year was almost up, and I couldn't let go of Yin to wait for me. Even if there were people waiting there, I still had to go. After a bumpy day, I finally returned to the Shenangjia scenic area. As soon as I arrived, I concealed my aura and released my spiritual sense to constantly check the surroundings. After confirming that there were no problems, I walked forward for a while. The cycle repeated itself, and my speed was extremely slow. It wasn't that I was being overly cautious. After Han Wennan's warning, I was very clear about the crazy things the three major powers would do in order to obtain the key to the mountain and sea realm. Therefore, I had to be vigilant of any signs of trouble. It usually took me an hour to walk, but it took me more than 6 hours to walk out of the Shenangjia scenic area. I continued on my way to the Fire God Temple. However, after walking for a while, I suddenly sensed that there seemed to be fighting in front of me. I immediately stopped and focused my senses. From the aura in front of me, the two people fighting had yang spirit cultivation, and I was very familiar with the aura of one of them. It was the Qingqiu clan. The other person was an ordinary Dao Qi Yang god, celestial master. I couldn't help but frown. I had already expected that someone from the Metaphysics Association would come here to look for me, so I wasn't surprised that a Yang god celestial master had appeared. But why did the Qingqiu clan come here? Could it be that they were also looking for me? Now that Yao Yao was the leader of the Qingqiu clan, it seemed normal for her to send someone from the Qingqiu clan to look for me. But after thinking about it, I quickly eliminated that possibility. I hadn't brought Yao Yao to the Fire God Temple, and I hadn't mentioned this place to her. Even if she had sent someone to look for me, how could it be such a coincidence that they happened to come here? After eliminating that possibility, I thought of something else. In the Qingqiu clan, only Yao Yao and the high priest had yang god cultivation. However, the person fighting in front of me also had yang god cultivation, but it wasn't them. Did the Qingqiu clan have a third yang god celestial master? Or was this person not from the Qingqiu clan? I was slightly curious. After thinking for a while, I decided to go over and check it out. No matter if the Qingqiu clan's fox demon had come here by chance or on purpose, since I had encountered him, I couldn't just stand by and watch. Moreover, we had the same enemy. If I didn't get rid of that yang god celestial master, my whereabouts would be exposed. When that happened, more people would be attracted, and I wouldn't be able to meet with Tao Wu in peace. Thinking about that, I lifted my feet and walked in the direction of the two auras. After a while, a man and a woman appeared fighting beside a call in front of me. The man was quite old. He had a black and white beard and wore a moon-colored robe. He had Dao Qi cultivation, and it was obvious that he was from the Metaphysics Association. However, his face was unfamiliar, and I hadn't seen him before. The person fighting was a young woman dressed in a green robe. Her body was surrounded by a thick demonic aura. It was indeed the Qingqiu clan that I had sensed earlier. I had originally planned to observe quietly from the side. Who knew that although the two of them were fighting, they were paying attention to their surroundings. As soon as I appeared, they stopped fighting and turned to look at me. They had discovered me immediately. The first person to react was the person from the Metaphysics Association. He obviously recognized me. After seeing me, he smiled and stroked his beard. The old president really has a godlike foresight. Zhou, you really came here. Since that's the case, come back with me. Hearing him speak, I frowned slightly and carefully checked his cultivation. However, I found that I couldn't see through him at all. His cultivation was at least at the middle stage of the Yang God realm. No wonder he looked so calm. He had probably seen through my cultivation and felt that he could defeat me. I ignored him for the time being and turned to look at the woman from the Qingqiu clan. To my surprise, I couldn't see through this woman's cultivation. The Yang God celestial master from the Qingqiu clan was enough to surprise me. I had never thought that her cultivation would be above mine. This was really incredible. Although I was shocked, I didn't ask much. The Qingqiu clan had an extraordinary origin. Previously, the high priest had told me that since the ancient war, the bloodline of the Qingqiu clan had weakened a lot. That was why they had declined today. However, they were an extremely powerful branch of the monster clan. They had a deep foundation, so there might be people who had newly awakened their bloodline. It was obvious that a lot of things had happened in the Qingqiu country during the time I had left. While I was thinking, the woman seemed to notice my gaze. She immediately bowed to me and said, "Greetings, divine envoy." She had revealed her identity. Although I still had many questions in my mind, it wasn't the time to ask. Thus, I just nodded, indicating that she didn't need to be so polite. The woman's behavior was naturally seen by the old man. He was obviously quite disdainful of the two of us. He snorted and said, "I didn't expect that a remnant of the witch clan like you would be involved with these monsters. You really are in cahoots with them." I didn't care about his words, but the woman from the Qingqiu clan seemed to be quite angry. She said to me, "Divine envoy, this person's cultivation is at the late stage of the Yang God realm. Divine envoy, please wait a moment. After I kill him, I will greet divine envoy." After saying that, she raised her leg and rushed forward. The two of them quickly fought again. I didn't act rashly for the time being. After watching for a while, I found that the woman from the Qingqiu clan seemed to have been injured in the previous battle. At this time, she was fighting with the old man and seemed to be in a difficult situation. However, overall, their cultivation levels were about the same. The old man wouldn't be able to gain any advantage for a while. After understanding the situation, I didn't intend to wait any longer. The situation was complicated. I didn't know how many people from the Metaphysics Association had come. It would be safer to get rid of this old man as soon as possible. Thus, I opened my mouth and spat out the Xian Yuan sword and joined the battle. The old man was quite knowledgeable. He raised his eyes and glanced at the sword in my hand. He grinned and said, "The Xian Yuan sword is really in your hands. Well, I'd rather not take the monster pill today. I'm going to take your Xian Yuan sword." I snorted coldly. This old man was really greedy. Although my cultivation was slightly lower than theirs, in terms of combat power, I didn't think I would lose to the middle stage of the Yang God realm. I could even fight with the late stage of the Yang God realm. I was afraid that he wouldn't be able to enjoy the Xian Yuan sword. In the veins of the heavens, the Dao Qi was running wildly, continuously transferring to the Xian Yuan sword. When I rushed in front of the old man, the Xian Yuan sword was full of qi. However, I didn't feel tired at all. It seemed that my strength had improved a lot in the past few months. The woman from the Qingqiu clan naturally noticed that the Xian Yuan sword in my hand was extraordinary. She turned around and stopped fighting with the old man. She stepped aside so that I had enough space to use the Xian Yuan sword qi. Seeing this, I immediately twisted my waist and stepped out of the 9-star heavenly dipper. The power in my hand suddenly increased, and I swung the Xian Yuan sword at the old man. In the blink of an eye, the Xian Yuan sword qi shot out like lightning, heading straight for his face. The old man talked big, but he was cautious. He seemed to know that the power of the Xian Yuan sword couldn't be matched. His body flashed, ready to dodge. Chapter 847. I turned my wrist and gently twisted the Xian Yuan sword. The sword qi moved with it and continued to chase after the old man. At the same time, I looked at the Qingqiu woman and motioned for her to attack from the front and back with me. We had to get rid of the old man as soon as possible. The Qingqiu woman was also a Yang God celestial master, so she naturally understood the meaning of my gaze. With a turn of my body, I went to the other side of the old man and shot a silver needle at him. Apparently, the old man hadn't expected that we would launch a pincer attack. He paused for a moment, and then his moon-colored robe suddenly swelled up. His beard and hair moved. He shouted and used some unknown method to bounce the silver needles away. At the same time, his body moved a few meters to the side, avoiding the Xian Yuan sword qi's attack. Although the old man had managed to escape, he had clearly used up a lot of his energy. He stood there motionless for a while. Taking advantage of his weakness had always been the only way to win. Thus, I didn't give him any time to breathe. I swung my sword again and hit him hard. In a hurry, the power of the Taoist qi in the sword was not too strong. However, my goal wasn't to kill him in one blow, but to force him back. The old man began to retreat to the side after receiving the heavy blow. However, he was strong. My move could only push him a few meters away. He was still not within the range of the Xian Yuan sword qi. Seeing that the sword qi was approaching, the old man seemed to realize what we were thinking. He turned around and charged at me instead of retreating. His hands were wrapped in thick Taoist qi, and his eyes were full of murderous intent. Seeing him charge at me, I waved my hand. Shaman qi flowed in front of me and set up a dark green barrier in an attempt to block his attack. At the same time, I had already grasped the jade bracelet in front of my chest and quickly replenished the Taoist qi that I had lost when using the Xian Yuan sword. He was extremely fast and hit the shaman qi barrier in the blink of an eye. With my cultivation, it was naturally difficult to block his attack using only shaman qi. Thus, I had prepared a backup plan and was waiting for him to break the barrier. However, I didn't expect that when his palm fell, the shaman qi barrier buzzed, but it didn't break. It was obvious that this old man was also an arrow at the end of its flight. He could not fully display his cultivation. I was overjoyed and was about to make my move, but his body suddenly trembled as he was firmly locked in place. When I took a closer look, I saw that the Green Mountains woman had taken action. She had used a clump of silvery hair to control the old man from behind. It seemed that after the old man was angered by me, his attention had been completely focused on me, giving the fox girl an opportunity to take advantage of him. Even though this old man was already at the end of his tether, I still didn't think that he would be so easily subdued. However, he didn't expect that the fox girl's figure would suddenly disappear, turning into a pink mist that completely enveloped the old man. It wrapped around him and directly sent him flying backwards. Obviously, she planned to drag the old man to the place where the Xianyuan sword would fall and use the Xianyuan sword chi to kill him. However, her move was not very wise. Although my cultivation was only at the early stage of yang spirit, my strength had increased rapidly due to the continuous strengthening of the yang spirit in recent months. The Xianyuan sword chi that I had used earlier was also several times stronger than before. Moreover, I had the support of the 9 stars heavenly dipper. If they fell into the range of the Xianyuan sword chi, the old man would not feel good, but I'm afraid that it would be difficult for her to escape. In the blink of an eye, the two arrived at the place where the Xianyuan sword chi would fall. The fox girl had no intention of stopping. She took the old man and rushed straight into the Xianyuan sword chi. In this situation, I couldn't help her. I could only watch the battle while quickly absorbing the dragon chi in the jade bracelet, trying to give the old man a fatal blow after he was seriously injured. With this in mind, the two had already met the Xianyuan sword chi. There was a loud bang, and a strong wave of air came from a position only a few meters away from me. This wave of air seemed to be powerful and unstoppable. It uprooted the flowers and plants within a few hundred meters of the surrounding area, and dust scattered everywhere. However, I was not distracted by this. Instead, I focused on the location of the explosion. I thought that both of them would be sent flying backward after receiving this blow, but I didn't expect that only the fox girl would be sent flying. She was hit by the Xianyuan sword chi and flew dozens of meters away. A few seconds later, she fell to the ground. Her chest rose and fell slightly, and then she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face instantly turned pale. Only then did I realize that after the woman had been attacked by the Xianyuan sword chi, she had saved her last bit of strength to keep the old man in the sword chi, which led to the current situation. After a while, the smoke and dust from the explosion had dispersed, revealing a deep pit on the ground. I was a little surprised that the old man hadn't been sent flying backward like the fox girl. But now, the scene gave me a reasonable explanation. At the bottom of the deep pit, the old man stood steadily. Above his head floated a figure that looked exactly like him. I easily recognized that it was the old man's yang spirit. I didn't expect that at such a critical moment, the old man would use a life-saving method and use the yang spirit to resist the Xianyuan sword chi. However, I wasn't surprised at all. Although I could fill the Xianyuan sword with Dao Qi, I was only at the early stage of the Yang God Celestial Master. Even with the addition of the 9 stars Heavenly Dipper, I could only use about 20% of the Xianyuan sword's power. For an ordinary Yang God Celestial Master, this move was enough to seriously injure him. But when I first saw this old man, I was quite surprised. On the surface, this person only had the cultivation of the late stage of the Yang God realm, but the fox girl and I couldn't seriously injure him. His real strength was probably at the great perfection of the Yang God realm. Even so, it wouldn't be easy for the old man to use the power of the Yang spirit to fight against the ancient divine weapon. Although I couldn't seriously injure him, I could at least injure him a little. With this thought in mind, I didn't dare to stop. While the old man hadn't recovered, I gave him a powerful blow. At this time, my physical strength had recovered, and the Dao Qi in my heavenly veins was flowing rapidly, all of it being sent to the Xianyuan sword. Although the old man's Yang spirit power was strong and could barely resist the Xianyuan sword Qi, the power of the Yang spirit was still a mortal cultivator's method. It wasn't enough to compete with the divine weapon in my hand. If I used a few Xianyuan sword chi in a row, I would definitely be able to kill him. Thinking of this, I had already arrived behind the old man. He was strong, so he could naturally sense my actions and quickly turned around. Only then did I see his current state. The old man's face was as white as paper, and blood was constantly seeping out of the corner of his mouth. His chest was heaving up and down, and it seemed that he had suffered a lot of damage. However, I knew that he didn't have this kind of strength because the yang spirit hadn't faded. Obviously, it hadn't hurt his foundation. With this thought in mind, I didn't dare to stop moving and immediately slashed at his neck. Unexpectedly, the corners of his mouth suddenly rose, and a playful expression appeared on his face. Seeing this, I was shocked. His smile was really strange. Could it be that I had fallen into his trap? With this thought in mind, I couldn't help but be distracted, and my hand movements slowed down a bit. Unexpectedly, the old man took advantage of this opportunity to quickly make a hand seal. In just a moment, the yang spirit above my head produced a strong aura and rushed toward me. The old man's yang spirit power was really strong, so I didn't dare to underestimate this brutal power. Then, I changed the direction of the Xianyuan sword in my hand and swung it hard, sending the Xianyuan sword chi toward the incoming power. In the blink of an eye, the two powers collided and produced a thunderous sound. The resulting huge wave was like a sharp blade. Even my young god celestial master, who has a tough body, found it hard to endure. The power of these two forces can be imagined. At the moment, the Taoist energy in my body had been used up, so I could only quickly circulate the shaman energy in my heavenly veins to form a barrier in front of me to resist the wave. After a few seconds, the surroundings became calm again. In order to preserve my strength, I also dispersed the shaman energy barrier. All of this happened in less than 10 seconds. At this time, the fox girl, who had been sent flying, slowly walked over. However, her clothes were ragged, so it must have been caused by the wave just now. In her current state, she was barely able to withstand it. It seemed that the barrier she had set up earlier had blocked most of the Xianyuan sword chi. Just as I was looking at the fox girl, the old man in front of me suddenly said, "Child of the Zhou family, the people of the Metaphysics Association say that you are a genius, but I don't think so. Today's battle has really made my eyes light up. You are worthy of me doing my best to fight against you." Hearing this, my face showed a very surprised expression. The old man's various methods had already made me speechless, but he said that he hadn't used his full strength. Looking at the old man's appearance, it didn't seem like he was speaking carelessly. Could it be that I was blind, and this old man wasn't just a yang spirit celestial master? Thinking about this, I hurriedly signaled the fox girl next to me to move back. This old man was really cunning. At such a close distance, if he suddenly attacked, it would be hard for us to react. Thus, the two of us moved back a dozen meters. Seeing us like this, the old man didn't chase after us. He just stood there and snorted. One of his hands formed a sword finger and slashed at his wrist. In the blink of an eye, a large amount of blood gushed out from his wrist. However, the blood didn't drip on ground. Instead, he used his Taoist energy to wrap it up, turning it into blood-red blood beads. Under his control, these blood beads constantly revolved around the Taoist energy around his body. This move of his was strange. I couldn't figure out in a short time, but I knew that it should be his strongest killing move. Thinking about this, I signaled the fox girl to prepare to fight the enemy. At this moment, it was a battle to the death. Today, we must kill this old man here and now. After hearing my words, the fox girl didn't dare to be negligent. She closed her eyes, and after a few seconds, the monster energy around her body surged. Her body turned, and she soared into the sky, stirring up gusts of wind around her. When she landed, she turned into a silver-white fox with 5 tails. Seeing that she had already transformed into her true form, I didn't hesitate and planned to use the witchcraft energy transformation technique. Previously, after learning the Taoist energy transformation technique, I tried to use witchcraft energy instead. In essence, the Taoist energy and witchcraft energy were both cultivating spiritual energy. Moreover, My yang spirit and witchcraft energy had the same body, so the Taoist energy transformation technique and witchcraft energy transformation technique weren't too different. Chapter 848. The blood beads that had been revolving around him had fused into a blood-red ribbon. The old man's eyes were closed at first, but when he opened them, his pupils were gone, leaving only the whites of his eyes, making him look rather terrifying. Although I didn't know what technique he had used, from the commotion, it didn't seem to be the work of a righteous person. However, I didn't have time to think about it. What happened next confirmed my guess. The blood-colored thread that had left his body circled around the old man a few times before suddenly flying towards the yang god above his head. The yang god opened its mouth and directly swallowed the blood-colored thread into its stomach. After a while, the yang spirit's body was surrounded by a blood-red mist, and the air was filled with a murderous aura. The yang spirit's body instantly grew several times larger. It struggled violently, as if it wanted to break free from the old man's control and attack us. Looking at this scene, I felt a sense of familiarity. Back at the back mountain of the Jade Buddha Temple, when I was fighting with Jinshan Temple's Long Pu Zhuang, the technique he used to control the Sakyamuni image was somewhat similar to the blood-red yang spirit in front of me. I was slightly startled. Could it be that this old man had also practiced Nanyang sorcery? After thinking for a while, I instinctively ruled out this conjecture. This old man was also an important person in the metaphysics society. If he wanted technique, he could get it. There was no need for him to study the Nanyang people's petty tricks. I just ruled out this possibility when the old man stared at us with his pale eyes. His voice was angry and sharp. I haven't used this blood sacrifice yang spirit technique for dozens of years. I didn't expect that it would be you who would force me into this situation. All right, I'll let you experience the power of this Nanyang secret technique. It really was a Nanyang secret technique? I frowned. This was the first time I had heard of this blood sacrifice yang spirit technique. Although it was a Nanyang secret technique, for what the old man said, its power should be quite extraordinary. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kept it as a life-saving technique. While I was thinking about this, the blood-colored sun god dashed toward us. At that moment, the witchcraft energy in my body had just moved to my life palace. I had just started cultivating the technique of transforming Tao energy into form, so I wasn't familiar with it yet. Moreover, I was using witchcraft energy at that moment, so I was unable to resist the blood-colored yang spirit's attack. I could only ask the fox girl next to me if I could buy some time. After listening, she nodded without any hesitation. Oracle, get ready. I'll block this wave. I couldn't help but say that the vixen in front of me made me look at her in a different light. When I was in the Green Hill country, I once talked to the high priest about the character of the Green Hill tribe. According to the high priest, the Green Hill tribe is generally timid and cowardly. The reason they have survived until now is largely due to this. In the process of retrieving the monster core, I have indeed witnessed this character of the Green Hill tribe. But now, the fox girl was completely different. After responding to me, she turned her head and stared at the old man's blood-colored yang spirit. She was full of heroic spirit and didn't look the least bit timid. It wasn't the time to be surprised. After the fox girl welcomed the old man's yang spirit, I hurriedly continued to prepare the witchcraft energy transformation technique. I quickly guided the witchcraft energy into the yang spirit and put aside all distracting thoughts. I visualized the form that I needed to transform. In just a few seconds, the yang spirit spat out a thick silver needle. At the same time, a similar silver needle appeared in my palm. This was what I was visualizing and also what my witchcraft energy would transform into. After the silver needle appeared, I felt a sense of exhaustion in my heaven meridian, and my body became weak. Although the silver needle in my hand had taken shape, it hadn't completely fused with my witchcraft energy. I couldn't use it to join the battle, so I could only stand on the side and watch. At this moment, the fox girl had arrived next to the blood-colored yang spirit. She showed her real body again and swelled up. She twisted her huge body and bit the blood-colored yang spirit. However, Just as she was about to bite the yang spirit, the blood-colored yang spirit suddenly stopped. It raised its hands, and a wisp of evil energy shot out from its palms. It aimed at the fox girl's face. The wind from the palm hadn't arrived yet, but the energy it carried had condensed the surrounding mist into frost, which fell to the ground one drop at a time. After the frost fell to the ground, it turned into wisps of black smoke that corroded the weeds on the ground, leaving no trace of life. This method chilled me. I had never thought that the yang spirit blood sacrifice technique would be so powerful. If the fox girl was hit by this palm, she would be corroded like the weeds. With that thought in mind, I became anxious and hurried to shout at the fox girl, "Don't take this attack head on." The fox girl also noticed the changes in the surroundings. Before I could finish, she twisted her body and dodged to the side. However, after she dodged, the evil energy headed straight for me. I didn't have much shaman energy left in my body, so I was afraid I wouldn't be able to resist this evil energy. With that thought in mind, I hurried to urge the silver needle in my hand. However, the silver needle seemed to be out of my control and wouldn't listen to me. Seeing that the aura of death was approaching, I didn't know how to deal with it. Beads of sweat rolled down my forehead. When the aura was only a few meters away from me, I had no choice but to throw the silver needle in my hand, which hadn't fully revealed its power, toward the evil energy. As soon as the silver needle left my hand, it separated into hundreds of tiny silver needles that pierced the evil energy. After they collided with each other, the silver needles didn't have much defensive power since they were my means of attack. Seeing that they were about to pierce through the evil energy, I had no choice but to read the Heavenly Master's word spell and shout, "Explode." In an instant, hundreds of silver needles made of shaman energy exploded. Naturally, the evil energy couldn't resist it and turned into nothingness in an instant. After it disappeared, a wave of air was generated. At this moment, I was exhausted and couldn't resist the wave of air. My chest seemed to have been hit, and I was thrown dozens of meters away by the wave of air. I fell to the ground. I tasted something sweet in my throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. After a few seconds, I propped myself up and looked at the battle. Previously, I had used the shaman energy transformation technique with great difficulty, but I didn't have time to deal with the blood-colored yang god. I used it to save my life in a hurry, but now I didn't have the strength to use other techniques. The fox girl seemed to be seriously injured. She was curled up on the ground, panting slightly. Her situation didn't seem to be much better than mine. My brain was working frantically, trying to find a way to survive. However, the shaman energy in my body wasn't enough. Without the support of power, it was difficult to use any techniques. That old man was ruthless, so he obviously wouldn't give me a chance to breathe. What should I do now? While I was thinking, the old man laughed wantonly. He looked at me from afar and said, "Joe, don't be so depressed. Decades ago, when I was still at the peak of the seal, I used this blood sacrifice technique to kill a young god celestial master. After decades of cultivation, my strength is close to the peak of the young god realm. With the power of this technique, even a rush realm cultivator wouldn't be able to deal with it easily. You're only at the early stage of the young god realm, yet you can withstand this move of mine. Even if you die, you should have no regrets." After saying that, he didn't give me any time to respond. The blood-colored young god's hand once again produced a wave of evil energy and headed toward my face. He was really as ruthless as I thought. He didn't give me any time to breathe. In the face of this evil energy, I couldn't deal with it at all. Just as I was frantically thinking of a countermeasure, the fox girl in the distance, who was also injured, seemed to see that I didn't have the strength to resist. She suddenly jumped up from the ground and rushed toward the evil energy, as if she wanted to resist this attack. I couldn't help but feel anxious. How could a human body resist the power of this evil energy? Although I was moved by her action, it was no different from hitting a stone with an egg. It wasn't a wise move. As I was about to stop her, the old man standing behind the blood-colored young god suddenly made a move. His feet moved like the wind, and in a flash, he appeared behind the fox girl. He looked so smart, and he didn't look injured at all. Before I could react, the old man rubbed his hands and released a mass of Taoist energy. He fiercely hit the fox girl's back and coldly shouted, "Animals like you don't deserve to die under my young god realm." As soon as he said that, the fox girl screamed and quickly fell to the ground. After receiving this attack, the fox girl's injuries became more serious. After falling to the ground, her body kept twitching. After trying several times, she didn't have the strength to stand up. She could only turn her head to look at me. Her scarlet eyes were filled with guilt. Looking at her eyes, I also felt sad. Although I was prepared for today's matter, I didn't expect that I would encounter such a strong enemy. At this moment, I no longer had the strength to escape. I could only watch helplessly as the evil energy approached me. This feeling of helplessness was quite familiar. I had encountered a similar situation in the Spirit Lock Tower. I had once sunk into a bottomless abyss and was on the verge of death. In the end, Bayan had woken me up. Later on, I had asked Bayan why she had appeared in the Spirit Lock Tower. She had told me that she had never left the Fire God Temple. The voice that had sounded in my head that day was just my imagination. But at this time, my mind was blank, and I didn't even think of Bayan. As the aura of death approached, my heart was terrifyingly calm. In the blink of an eye, the evil energy was approaching, so I simply closed my eyes. But at this time, in the midst of the chaos, the figure of the monster Emperor June that I had seen in the Medicine King Valley suddenly flashed in my mind. Before I could react, there was another roar in my ears. After a few seconds, the surroundings returned to normal. I was a little confused. I didn't know what had happened, but I felt that I hadn't been hit by the evil energy. I quickly opened my eyes and looked around. I was in a deep pit, and not far from me was a silver-white fox. She was staring at me with burning eyes, and tears kept flowing out of her eyes. Chapter 849. After my mind cleared up, I lifted my eyes to look around. I didn't dare to be careless. However, I couldn't find the old man. He seemed to have left. I felt strange. The evil energy had almost reached my face, but why hadn't it hit me? Moreover, he hadn't killed the fox yet. Why'd he do that? Did an expert come to help me? After thinking about it, it was possible. However, I was afraid that only the evil spirit could save me in such a short time. He must have known that Bayan and I were going to be together for half a year. That was why he came to find me. When he saw that I was facing a strong enemy, he came to save me when I was on the verge of death. The old man knew that he couldn't defeat the evil spirit, so he hurriedly ran away. The evil spirit chased after him. That was how the two of them disappeared. In this way, it was indeed reasonable. Now that I had escaped from death, I exhaled in relief. I propped myself up and slowly walked toward the fox girl. After a while, I came to her and asked, "How are your wounds?" She didn't answer me immediately. After a while, she said, "Fox. Fox King's power." Her eyes were bright, and she looked a little surprised. However, I didn't understand what she meant. I asked, "What is this Fox King's power? Is it the reason why she came to Shenanjia?" After listening to me, the fox girl shook her head. She was a little emotional, and her words were incoherent. I didn't understand what she meant. Seeing that I didn't understand, she became more anxious. After a while, she calmed down and finished speaking. According to her, she thought that we would all die here today. However, when she was desperate, the Fox King's power suddenly appeared and defeated the blood-colored Yang spirit. As soon as the Yang spirit was destroyed, the old man turned into smoke and disappeared in the air. The Fox King that the Fox Girl mentioned was Monster King Ling. I knew that, but Monster King Ling had already died and reincarnated. Why did the Fox Girl say that the Fox King's power had suddenly appeared? I had this question in my mind, so I blurted it out. The Fox Girl saw that I had interrupted her and hurried to explain. The Fox King's power had shot out from my forehead. The Qingxiu clan had a close relationship with the Fox Monarch, and the Fox Monarch had set up a restriction in their bloodline. The moment the golden light appeared, the blood in the Fox Girl's body quickly churned, and a wave of pressure almost suffocated her. Only then did she determine that the golden light was the power of the Fox King. Her words reminded me of the image of the monster Emperor June that had appeared in my mind when I was on the brink of death. Then I heard a loud explosion. In that case, the Fox King's power had appeared at that time. However, when the Fox Girl mentioned the golden light that shot out from my forehead, I thought of another matter. When I was in the wasteland behind the Jade Buddha Temple and was suppressed by the pure dragon village, a golden light also appeared on the forehead of my young spirit. With that golden light, I disintegrated the pure dragon village after the young spirit had left my body. From this, it could be seen that the golden light back then was also the so-called Fox King's power. When I advanced to the young spirit stage, I felt that the mark on the forehead of the young spirit was a little strange. In that case, the mark was the symbol of the Fox King's power. In that case, the Fox King's power had always existed in the young spirit and would only be triggered in times of danger. Since the power came from the monster Emperor June, it was normal that the old man and his blood-colored young spirit couldn't resist it. However, the Fox King's power was really strong. If I could control it as I wished, I would be invincible in the world. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but feel excited. However, if I only thought about it by myself, it would definitely be of little use. It would be better to wait for the evil spirit to return and ask him about it. In that case, I didn't dwell on this matter anymore. However, the Fox Girl kept asking me why I had the Fox King's power. From her words, it seemed that the Fox King's power was extremely precious. Even if I was the god messenger sent by the Fox King, I wouldn't be able to obtain such power. I was quite curious, but I didn't ask her. The more I spoke, the easier it would be for me to expose myself. However, she was willing to sacrifice herself to protect me. This friendship really moved me. Now that she kept asking, I couldn't just ignore her. However, I couldn't tell her the real reason, so I could only make up an excuse. I said that the Fox King had suddenly summoned me when I was on the verge of death. Seeing that I was in danger, he gave me some power to save my life. After hearing that, she became excited and asked if the Fox King was all right. I knew that the Qing Qiu tribe had been waiting for the Fox King to return for several thousand years. If I told her about the monster Emperor June's death, I was afraid that something unexpected would happen. I could only make up another excuse and say that the Fox King was all right. After hearing that, the Fox Girl didn't hesitate and said that she understood. She didn't pursue the matter any further. The matter had been resolved, but I still had some doubts in my heart that I wanted to ask her about. Due to her injuries, she couldn't walk around. It was a good time to ask her about her doubts. With that in mind, I asked the Fox Girl why she had come to Shenangjia. After hearing that, the Fox Girl quickly told me the details. From her, I learned that some time ago, the High Priest had divined that the mountain and sea realm was about to open. He then ordered the elders of the Qing Qiu tribe, whose cultivation bases were higher than the Yang God Celestial Master, to inform the Demon Clan in the outside world. They were to go to the Qing Qiu state to discuss the matter of welcoming the Fox King. She had come to Shenangjia to inform the Lu tribe. She mentioned that the High Priest had divined that the mountain and sea realm was about to open, which wasn't beyond my expectations. Recently, whether it was the Shaman tribe, the Buddhist sect, or the Xiandao tribe, all of them had been discussing this matter. With the Demon Clan trapped in the mountain and sea realm, it was normal for the Qing Qiu tribe to be anxious. However, all of them had their own plans. The Shaman tribe had opened the mountain and sea realm to prevent the Shaman tribe from going extinct. The Xiandao tribe and the Buddhist sect believed that the mountain and sea realm was actually the world of immortals, and that opening the mountain and sea realm was to seek eternal life. However, the Demon Clan wanted to open the mountain and sea realm because they thought that the monster Emperor June was still there. They wanted to welcome him back and lead the Demon Clan back to the peak. They all had their own standpoints, and I couldn't decide who was right or wrong. However, there was no doubt that the mountain and sea realm had to be opened. The matter gradually became clear, and there was nothing to ponder about. However, the Fox Girl had mentioned that the High Priest had asked Yang, God Heavenly Master, and above elders to come out and deliver the message. That meant that the Fox Girl in front of me was an elder. Combined with my previous conjecture, the state of Qing Qiu had really undergone earth-shaking changes. In just a few short months, the positions of elders had all changed hands. Looking at the fox girl's appearance, she shouldn't be more than 100 years old. If it had been a few months ago, no matter how talented she was, her cultivation base would have been limited by her bloodline. But now, why was she at the middle young, God, heavenly master realm? I really couldn't figure out the reason behind this, and I was very curious. I quickly asked the fox girl what had happened in the state of Qingxiu over the past few months. The fox girl was very intelligent, and as soon as she heard my question, she understood what I meant. She immediately explained to me. According to her, ever since Yao Yao had become the clan leader, there had been no opposition in the clan. Even some stubborn people didn't dare to openly criticize her. Yao Yao knew that if she wanted all the people to submit to her, she had to do something that would satisfy everyone. She spent a lot of time and visited the people before she found out that the biggest problem the clan was facing was the speed of cultivation. This matter had troubled the people of Qingxiu for thousands of years. For thousands of years, the people of Qingxiu had been working hard, and they knew that it wouldn't be solved in a day. After she asked the high priest for advice, she found out that the root cause of this situation was the serious defect in the bloodline of Qingxiu. As long as the defect in the bloodline was solved, the problem of cultivation would be solved. However, it wasn't that the previous clan leaders couldn't see the crux of the problem, but because their bloodline was the same as the people of Qingxiu, it was useless to use their bloodline as a guide. However, Yao Yao was different. She was from the Tushan clan and had a powerful bloodline. If she used her blood as a guide, she might be able to completely solve the defect in the bloodline of Qingxiu. Since there was a method, Yao Yao naturally wouldn't let it go. After discussing it with the high priest, she started preparing to use her blood as a guide. However, this matter couldn't be guaranteed, so she could only choose a few people from the clan to test it first. She didn't expect that these people would really solve the defect in the bloodline. Not only that, but their cultivation talent also improved significantly. The Qingxiu country was originally a secluded place, and its location was very hidden. It had abundant spiritual energy, and the clan had a complete set of cultivation methods. In less than a few months, most of the people who were used as test subjects had advanced to the Yangshun Celestial Master level. The fox girl in front of me was one of those test subjects. At this point, the fox girl didn't say anything more. Although she was a test subject, according to the final result, she was still very satisfied. In just a few months, she was able to rise from the glorious consciousness realm to the Yangshun Celestial Master level. This speed is really too shocking. Even someone like me, who is all 5 elements, can only look at it and sigh. However, although I don't know what kind of secret method Yao Yao used to use her blood as a guide to have such an effect, based on the strength that the fox girl showed earlier, she hasn't really reached the level of the Yangshun Celestial Master. In other words, this secret method can only improve the surface of the cultivation, and the real strength still needs to be accumulated through continuous cultivation. Now that the matter was clear and the fox girl's strength had recovered a lot, I didn't plan to stay here any longer. I told her that I still had something to do, so I said goodbye. I also asked her to send my regards to Yao Yao after returning to the Qingxiu country. After saying that, I got up to leave. However, I hadn't taken a few steps when the fox girl called me again. I didn't know what else she wanted, so I turned around and asked her. I didn't expect that she would tell me that she had been here for a few days, but she still hadn't found the whereabouts of the Liu clan. She asked me if I knew their location. Speaking of the Liu clan, I knew about them. The Liu clan is one of the 5 clans of the Gray Fox and White Willow, which refers to the Snake clan. However, the sudden mention of the snake race reminded me of something. When I first entered Shenangjia, the snake spirit told me that he had sensed his wife's aura here, so he asked me to let him go and find her. Later, he didn't return for a long time, so I went to find him. Finally, I found the couple in a secret place. Chapter 850. I thought of the little white snake, but I wasn't sure if the fox girl was looking for them or not, so I asked her about it. The fox girl didn't seem to know either. After thinking for a while, she said, "Although this place is big, it's impossible to say that there are 2 Liu clans. It should be her clan." Her words made sense, so I nodded. If that's the case, I should be able to help you find out some information. The fox girl had risked her life to save me, so I had no reason not to help her now. After I said that, I immediately summoned the snake spirit. The snake spirit was still as lazy as usual. After it came out, it stretched its body and smiled. "What's the matter?" I pointed around and asked, "Do you know if there are any Lu clans around Shenanjia? If there are, where are they?" The snake spirit rolled its eyes at me and pouted. "Why are you asking me that? I'm not familiar with this place, and I'm not a member of the Lu clan. I'm a dragon, and they're snakes. How can it be the same?" The snake spirit isn't a member of the Lu clan? I frowned. He had met the little white snake, Hui Hui, and his original body was a snake. I subconsciously thought that he was a member of the Lu clan, but I was wrong. I wanted to ask about Hui Hui again, but the snake spirit waved its hand and continued, "I've been in Shenanjia before, but I've never had any contact with the Lu clan. Hui Hui and I met each other halfway, and we became husband and wife. Perhaps it was because of the mention of Hui Hui." The snake spirit suddenly stopped. She thought about it and continued, "I seem to have heard from Hui Hui that she is a member of the Lu clan. Because the elders in her family forced her to marry an ugly guy, she ran away and met me. Why don't we look for Hui Hui?" I didn't need to answer. The fox girl had finally heard the news of the Lu clan, so she nodded in agreement. The snake spirit didn't seem to see the fox girl. When it heard her voice, it turned to look at her with a serious face. "Who are you?" Fundamentally speaking, the snake spirit was a scale insect, while the fox girl was a monster. They belonged to the same species. In addition, the fox girl had the cultivation of yang spirit, so it was normal for the snake spirit to be surprised. I told her about the fox lady's identity. Of course, the spirit snake knew about the Green Hill tribe. After hearing that she was the fox lady, her expression returned to normal. She nodded and said, "Let's go and find Hui Hui. She should still be living in that canyon." The canyon that the serpent spirit mentioned was the Crimson Cloud Gorge that I had discovered when I first came here. I had gone to see Hui Hui with the serpent spirit that time, so I was naturally familiar with the way. I didn't need the serpent spirit to lead the way, so I directly walked toward the gorge. Along the way, the snake spirit's face was very calm. He didn't look excited to see his wife at all. It was normal. Aside from the first time I had come here, this fellow had said that he missed Hui Hui very much. After that, I had come here many times, and the snake spirit had only gone to see Hui Hui once. This fellow was quite fickle. I guess he didn't care much about his wife. After 1 hour, we arrived at the Crimson Cloud Gorge. This place was completely different from the first time we had come here. It used to be a barren land, but now it was overgrown with weeds, and there was no trace of Yin Chi. The first time I had seen Hui Hui, she had said that the reason she had hidden in this gorge wasn't just to avoid being chased by others. More importantly, there was an army of hundreds of thousands of ghosts in this gorge. She had relied on sucking those ghosts to improve her cultivation base. When I had seen her later, she had almost turned into a flood dragon. However, since then, I had sucked the army of hundreds of thousands of ghosts into the jade bracelet. I didn't know if Hui Hui was still here after that incident. With that thought in mind, I released my spiritual consciousness to sense around, but I couldn't sense Hui Hui's aura. When I had seen her, my cultivation base was too low, so I couldn't remember her aura. I couldn't sense her now, but it didn't mean that she wasn't here. While I was thinking about this, the serpent spirit suddenly stopped, and his face changed slightly. I didn't know what he had found, so I hurried to ask. The serpent spirit shook his head and said, "I've sensed that Hui Hui's aura isn't in the previous cave. She seems to have left this place." I had already guessed this result, but when I heard the serpent spirit confirm it, my heart didn't waver. The fox girl was originally full of joy, but when she suddenly heard the news, her face instantly became gloomy and disappointed. After all, she had saved her life. Seeing her like this, I couldn't bear to see her like this, so I asked the serpent spirit if there was any other way to find Hui Hui. The serpent spirit thought for a while and said, "I don't have a good way. I haven't had much contact with her all these years. But let's go to the cave where she used to live and have a look. Maybe we can find some clues." It seemed that this was the only way. I nodded and called the fox girl. Then, we followed the serpent spirit to the cave. On the way, we passed by a cliff. The serpent spirit stopped and told me that it had met Hui Hui here, who was covered in cuts and bruises. The serpent spirit didn't intend to pay attention to her, but they were of the same kind after all. He couldn't bear Hui Hui's pleas for help, so he took pity on her and saved her. After that, they stayed together for a few years. The snake spirit could not bear the loneliness and left this place to travel outside. In the end, not long after, his life was taken by someone. He hid in a Tao artifact compass and barely managed to keep his remnant soul from being destroyed. They told us to wait here and said that they would go back and report to the elders. Then, they would make a decision. In the current situation, the fox girl would be able to complete her task as long as the elder of the Lu tribe came. The snake spirit and I didn't need to participate in this. With that thought, I bid farewell to the fox girl. The fox girl naturally thanked me again and again. She told me that she would definitely bring my greetings to Yao Yao. After bidding farewell, I left with the snake spirit. It wasn't far from the half-year deadline. I'd better go to the fire god temple first to see if there were any unexpected situations. After all, the old man had already found this place. It was hard to guarantee that the elder wouldn't send someone else. Not long after we left, I felt a strong aura coming from behind me. It was most likely the elder of the Lu tribe. I didn't mind it and continued to walk forward. However, at that moment, the snake spirit suddenly stopped and his face darkened. I didn't know why, but I hurriedly asked. The snake spirit told me that he had sensed Hui's aura. I couldn't help but be surprised. Was the elder of the Lu tribe Hui? Before I could ask, the snake spirit suddenly turned around and ran in the previous direction. This action made me feel a little strange. Just now, in a Shapei gorge, the snake spirit's behavior showed that he didn't care about Hui. Why was he so anxious now? Although I felt strange, I was also worried about the snake spirit. I didn't have time to think and quickly followed him. When we returned to the previous place, the fox girl was standing in front of a man in black, talking about something. This man in black should be the elder of the Lu tribe, but his whole body was wrapped in black, so I couldn't see his appearance. However, from his figure, it was obvious that he was a man. He didn't look like Hui. Before I could react, the snake spirit had already rushed forward and grabbed the collar of the man in black, shouting, "What did you do to Hui?" In the face of this sudden change, the man in black didn't show the slightest fear. He coldly snorted at the snake spirit. "Where did this little baby come from? You don't know life from death." As he spoke, black smoke appeared in his hands out of thin air, and he fiercely slapped the snake spirit. Chapter 851. Judging from the snake spirit's behavior, this Lu tribe elder was obviously related to Hui's disappearance. No wonder he was so angry. While I was thinking, the black-clothed man's palm had already landed on the snake spirit's body. If it was an ordinary person, a young god celestial master would be able to kill him with one blow. Even if it was someone with the same cultivation level, they would be seriously injured if they were caught off guard. However, the snake spirit not only had the cultivation level of a young god celestial master, but it had also transformed into a real dragon. It wasn't difficult for a scale worm to become a young god celestial master. As long as it had good cultivation talent and suitable cultivation techniques, it could become a young god in a few hundred years. However, transforming into a real dragon didn't depend on cultivation level. It was more important to have bloodline and opportunity. The snake spirit's original body was a dragon, so its bloodline was needless to say. I was also a key part of Emperor Ku's thousands of years of plan. The snake spirit often accompanied me, so there was no need to mention the opportunity. Moreover, according to the snake spirit's character, it wouldn't make a move unless it could deal with it easily. Therefore, I wasn't worried that the black-clothed man's attack would hurt the snake spirit. On the contrary, I was afraid that the snake spirit would transform into its original body and swallow the black-clothed man. At that time, the fact that the snake spirit had transformed into a real dragon couldn't be hidden anymore. Kunlun was an immortal realm. If a real dragon could enter Kunlun, there must be something special about it, apart from the consideration of cultivation level. We were now in the Lu tribe's territory. If they found out that the snake spirit had transformed into a real dragon, they might find a way to keep him here. In addition, the blood of a real dragon was an item of extreme yang. It was even more coveted than a real dragon's vein. If the snake spirit handled things a little differently, it would not only attract the attention of the Lu tribe, but it would also become the target of all the cultivators in the world. When we left Kunlun Mountain, I realized this problem. That was why I told the snake spirit not to reveal its original body. However, I didn't tell him the reason at that time. With his character, I was afraid that it would cause him to panic. Otherwise, when I really needed him, he would be afraid and would delay things. I stopped thinking about this matter and began to circulate my wizard chi. I planned to immediately set up a barrier here to isolate the real dragon's aura when the snake spirit transformed into its original body. However, as soon as the wizard chi flowed to his hands, the snake spirit retreated a few steps. However, his expression was the same as usual, so he should not have been injured. Fortunately, he did not transform into his original form because of this, which was somewhat not in line with the snake spirit style. However, just as I was feeling confused, the spirit snake muttered. As expected, from the looks of it, he seemed to have intentionally offended the black-clothed man. He probably wanted to test or confirm the guess in his heart. I have a whole new level of respect for him for being able to have such a calm mind. When the black-clothed man saw that he couldn't injure the snake spirit, he didn't continue to attack. Instead, he stared at the snake spirit. I couldn't see his face, so I didn't know what he was thinking. Seeing this, I couldn't suppress the curiosity in my heart anymore. I hurriedly went next to the spirit snake and asked what it had sensed. The snake spirit didn't ignore me as it had before. Instead, it told me that it had sensed Huey's blood essence in this person. According to him, he and Hui had been together for 100 years. Although they weren't husband and wife in name, they were husband and wife. So, the snake spirit was very sensitive about Hui. Even a piece of Huey's scale couldn't escape his perception. He had just sensed Huey's aura, but when he saw this man, he had an idea. He had to prove it by provoking him. After listening to the snake spirit's words, I understood. I had to say that the snake spirit's way of dealing with this matter was reliable. Since Huey's Tian had been absorbed by this man, something must have happened to Hui. Right now, we should go to the Lu tribe to investigate. However, the snake spirit had questioned the black-clothed man. He must have been alerted and wouldn't let us enter the Lu tribe. Even so, we might as well be tough and force these people to lead us into the Lu tribe. But then, we would have to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Lu tribe. This would put the fox girl in a difficult position. However, this was the worst-case scenario. After all, we didn't know the inside story. If Huey's bloodline was special like Yao Yao's, we might not know if she took the initiative to offer her Tian's Tian blood. Thinking of this, I told the snake spirit what I was thinking. This matter was related to Hui, so I had to let the snake spirit handle it himself. After listening to me, he didn't immediately respond. Instead, he lowered his head and pondered. He seemed to be weighing the pros and cons. Seeing this, I didn't disturb him. Instead, I asked the fox girl next to me in a low voice if I had informed them. If it was done, we could return. We didn't need to stay here any longer. Of course, I wanted to send her away. Once the snake spirit decided to use tough methods, the people of the Lu tribe wouldn't be his match. At that time, the fox girl would inevitably be involved. I knew that because of my identity, the fox girl wouldn't interfere in this matter. However, I was afraid that the Lu tribe would blame this matter on the Qingqiu tribe. The two tribes would inevitably become estranged. The final negotiation would also be affected. I was afraid that it would ruin Yao Yao's plan. I didn't know if the fox girl could understand the situation in front of her. After listening to my words, she didn't immediately respond. After thinking for a while, she nodded and excused herself. After she left, I could completely relax. No matter what choice the snake spirit made, I wouldn't let today's matter go. After a while, I finally received the snake spirit's reply. He told me that he planned to interrogate the man in black and ask him about Huey's current situation first. His thoughts were calm and clear. He had indeed considered it carefully. Since that was the case, I could only respect his choice and indicate that he would take the lead in this matter. Seeing that I had agreed, the snake spirit's aura surged and emitted a wave of pressure. At that moment, the three people behind the man in black were already kneeling on the ground. The man in black was trying his best to resist, but his body was also trembling. Dragons were the best of the scaled worms. Their natural restraints were difficult for the snake monsters to resist. Then, the snake spirit asked where Hui was and if she was okay. Due to the strong pressure emitted by the snake spirit, the three people kneeling on the ground couldn't speak. However, the man in black in front of me should be able to speak, but he didn't respond. Seeing this, the snake spirit wasn't in a hurry. Instead, it raised its aura again, and the pressure on its body became stronger. At that moment, the three people who were kneeling on the ground couldn't support themselves anymore. They all fell to the ground and kept twitching. The man in black also knelt on one knee. His neck was resisting, and he let out a low roar. The snake spirit spoke again, but the man in black still kept his mouth shut and didn't respond. Seeing this, I already had some ideas in my mind. It seemed that the possibility of Hui taking the initiative to offer her blood was very small. I was afraid that she had already been persecuted. The snake spirit didn't continue to raise its aura since it didn't get a response. Instead, it was thinking about something like me. After a while, it moved and lifted one of the people on the ground. Then, it erased the pressure on him and repeated the previous words, indicating that the person should tell me the details. After the pressure was removed, the person's body softened. He seemed to be exhausted. Since he had already tasted the snake spirit's tricks, he naturally didn't dare to hide anything. He immediately told the snake spirit that Hui was in the Liu family's palace. As for whether she was safe or not, he didn't know. The person's eyes were filled with fear, and he didn't hide his words. It was obvious that he wasn't lying. In that case, Hui was most likely trapped in the Liu family's palace. However, the snake monster's status was low, so he couldn't know the inside story. It seemed that I had to ask the man in black if I wanted to know the details. The spirit snake seemed to understand what I was thinking. He casually threw the snake monster aside. Then he lifted the black-clothed man and coldly said, "If you don't tell me the details, I will kill you immediately." As he spoke, his eyes were filled with murderous intent. I hadn't seen him like this since he had mistakenly entered the ancient battlefield in Chiyo's tomb. The snake spirit had lost its mind and turned into a dragon. Even so, the man in black still refused to speak. This completely angered the snake spirit. He roared and his aura increased. When I saw this, I was stunned. If I let him increase his aura, I was afraid that he wouldn't be able to hide the true dragon's aura in his body. Thinking of this, I immediately set up a barrier of witchcraft energy around us and stopped the snake spirit. However, the snake spirit was so enraged that he didn't care about my words at all. The more he behaved like this, the more worried I was. Back then, even enlightened Master Guan's array formation was unable to isolate the aura of the demon core. The aura of the true dragon was comparable to the aura of the demon core. How could my simple spiritual energy barrier completely isolate the aura of the true dragon, which was the purest form of Yang? Just as I was at a loss, the snake spirit's aura suddenly stopped. I was suspicious and looked up. I found that his body was trembling and his face was pale. He seemed to be exhausted. However, he wasn't injured, and the man in black didn't do anything. Why did he look like this? After thinking about it carefully, I guessed that since the snake spirit had turned into a true dragon and advanced to the Yang God realm, he had neglected his cultivation and his realm was unstable. He had forcefully increased his aura several times, which had consumed a lot of his strength. However, seeing him like this made me relax. I couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. I moved closer to the snake spirit and patted his shoulder, asking him to retract his aura to preserve his strength. Perhaps he knew that he couldn't hold on any longer, so he retracted his aura. His complexion looked better. Chapter 852. Perhaps he thought that he had the cultivation of a young god celestial master. Even if we killed him in anger, as long as his young god was not destroyed, he could find a new body to resurrect. Little did he know that I had already predicted his thoughts. When he heard what I said, his expression changed drastically. He stood there in silence, as if he was weighing the pros and cons in his heart. It could be seen that Huey's matter was very important to the Liu clan. It was enough to make the elder in black robe try his best to keep it a secret. However, after a while, the elder in black robe relaxed and sighed softly. He seemed to know that he was at a complete disadvantage and did not have the capital to negotiate with us. Helpless, he could only choose to compromise and tell us the details. According to him, Hui was indeed under house arrest in the Liu clan's palace. Her life was not in danger yet, but with her current condition, she would definitely die within a month. Hearing this, the snake's spirit was furious. He walked to the elder in black robe and lifted him up. He asked them what they had done to Hui. Since the elder in black robe had chosen to speak, he naturally would not hide anything. I learned from him that Huey's bloodline was very special. Her blood contained a powerful force. In addition, Hui was about to transform into a Jiao. This kind of bloodline talent was even more coveted. It had been thousands of years since a member of the Liu clan had been able to successfully transform into a dragon. Now that a person with such a good bloodline like Hui had suddenly appeared, the Liu clan's royal family would naturally not let her go easily. Speaking of this, I roughly understood. Hui was the same as Yao back then. They both had a bloodline that had not been seen in the clan for thousands of years. However, the difference between the two was that the Qingqiu clan had elected Yao as their leader to lead them back to the peak, while the Liu clan's royal family coveted Huey's bloodline talent and wanted to take it for themselves. What puzzled me was that they had both lost their blood, but why was Yao safe and sound? Thinking of this, I suddenly realized that it might have something to do with the Fox King's blood that Yao had obtained when she had advanced to become a seal celestial master. However, what made me even more curious was that Hui was a member of the Liu clan. The Liu clan should have long known about the abnormality of her bloodline talent. Why did the elder in black robe say that he had accidentally learned of it? Thinking about this, I asked about the doubts in my heart. I wanted to find an answer from the black-clothed elder. When he heard my question, he didn't dare to deny it. He quickly told me that the Liu family had a strict hierarchy. The members of the family were ranked according to their cultivation talents. When the children and grandchildren were born, their cultivation talents would be tested. Hui was at the bottom of the family. A few hundred years ago, she had run away to avoid her marriage. However, when she returned to the family a few years ago, she caught the attention of the royal family. If it weren't for the fact that she had a relative who was still alive, she would have been treated as an alien. However, the black-clothed elder did not know why she had become like this in these hundreds of years. In this way, Hui must have had a fortuitous encounter to possess her current natural talent. However, the last time we saw her, she already showed signs of transforming into a flood dragon. At that time, her bloodline talent had already changed greatly. As such, this matter must have happened some time ago. The snake spirit and Hui had lived together for 100 years, so perhaps he should know about this. Thinking so, I turned to look at the snake spirit. He might have understood the meaning in my eyes, but he looked confused, indicating that he didn't know about this matter. Perhaps Hui had some fortuitous encounter in the 100 years after he left. In this way, it was possible. Then, the snake spirit gestured for the black-clothed elder to lead the way. It seemed that he planned to go to the Liu family palace to rescue Hui. However, this matter could not be so impatient. The black-clothed elder in front of me was a young god celestial master and an elder of the Liu family. Imagine that an elder was sent to be in charge of peripheral protection. It could be imagined that his strength was at the bottom of the list. Based on the situation of the Qingqiu family, the cultivation of the highest ruler of the Liu family was at least at the peak of Yang God. Of course, this was just my guess. We had not yet reached the Liu family's territory, so we could take this opportunity to understand the internal situation so that we could prepare early. Otherwise, if this black-clothed elder were to secretly inform them and let them be on guard, wouldn't we be walking right into a trap then? Although the snake spirit and I were strong, it was difficult for the two of us to fight against so many people. Moreover, we had never been to the Liu family's territory, so we didn't know what they had planned. At that time, not only would we not be able to rescue Hui, but we would also be trapped in a quagmire. Thinking of this, I interrupted the snake spirit's words and called him aside to tell him what I was thinking. After listening to me, the snake spirit frowned and thought for a while. He sighed and said, "Why don't we disguise as them and sneak in? What do you think?" After listening to the snake spirit's idea, I did not rush to respond. Instead, I drove the three snake monsters away, leaving only the black-clothed elder. At this time, my purpose was very clear. It was useless for the three of them to stay here. If we killed them, it would arouse the suspicion of the Liu family. Moreover, they were not the mastermind of this matter, nor did they get any benefits. They did not touch the core of the matter, so we had no reason to kill them. More importantly, we could not delay this trip for too long. I could not miss the day of meeting with Tao Wu. The three of them were too low in status, so they could not easily get close to the Liu family palace. On the contrary, if we let them go, they would provide us with a good cover. The snake spirit's previous words reminded me that we could indeed disguise as the people of the Liu family. However, the aura on our bodies was too different from that of the Liu family, so we had to prepare carefully. Thinking of this, I summoned Tong Tong and handed the jade bracelet to her. She looked at me with a puzzled expression, obviously not understanding what I meant. Then, I whispered to her to use the jade bracelet to absorb all of the monster aura in the black-clothed elder's body into the jade bracelet. The most crucial step for us to disguise as the people of the Liu family was the monster aura in the black-clothed elder's body. As for his appearance, there was no need to worry too much. The reason why the black-clothed elder was wrapped in a long robe was that he didn't want others to know his appearance. This was the most advantageous condition for us. After listening to my words, Tong Tong and the snake spirit were enlightened and exclaimed in understanding. I didn't hide my words, so the black-clothed elder naturally heard everything. However, he was already a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Facing the three of us, he couldn't resist at all. However, he didn't lose the arrogance of an elder of the Liu family. He didn't beg for mercy, which made me admire him a lot. Since the matter had been explained, we didn't delay any further. I was afraid that the people who had left earlier would quickly find help to rescue him. As such, I waved my hand to set up a witchcraft barrier around us. On the one hand, it prevented the snake spirit's aura from spreading, and on the other hand, it was convenient to collect the black-clothed elder's monster aura. After that, I nodded at the snake spirit, indicating that we could begin. After receiving the order, the snake spirit didn't hesitate. Its aura suddenly increased, pressing the black-clothed elder to kneel on the ground. His body trembled violently. Then, I placed both of my hands on his forehead, intending to extract his yang spirit. His current appearance made me feel pity for him. This was the first time I had seen a young god celestial master not resist at the moment of life and death. However, it was all because of the snake spirit's true dragon's aura. However, this pressure was effective against scale worms of the same or lower cultivation level. If their cultivation level was higher, I was afraid that there wouldn't be such a strong reaction. However, pity was pity. If I wanted to successfully rescue Hui, I had to use this method. With this thought in mind, I put aside the distracting thoughts in my mind. The Taoist Qi in my body was activated to the extreme, and my hands formed sword fingers to extract the black-clothed elder's yang spirit from his body bit by bit. When a person was about to die, they would naturally fight for it out of instinct. However, due to the tyrannical pressure of the snake spirit's true dragon, the black-clothed elder couldn't resist it after several painful wails. The yang spirit in his life palace was completely extracted by me. The moment the yang spirit left his body, I realized that the black-clothed elder's appearance was really not flattering. He had triangular eyes on his triangular face. No wonder he had hidden his appearance. However, the more he did this, the more I felt that it would work. After the young spirit left his body, thick black smoke was emitted from his body. This black smoke was monster aura. Earlier, I had told Tong Tong about this matter. Naturally, she wouldn't neglect it. Her hands immediately produced pure yin qi, which surrounded the black smoke. Then, the surrounding yin qi continued to shrink, gathering the black smoke into a ball and returning it to the jade bracelet. After Tong Tong was done, the black-clothed elder's body turned into a giant black python that curled up into a ball. There was no trace of vitality. Seeing this, I immediately retracted my attention and quickly used the soul-searching technique to transfer all the memories of the black-clothed elder's yang spirit to my body for my use. After this matter was over, there was no need for the black-clothed elder's yang spirit to exist anymore. Then, I took out the Xianyuan sword from my mouth. When the Xianyuan sword was full of Taoist qi, the 9 stars heavenly dipper under my feet fell at the same time and slashed at the black-clothed elder's yang spirit. Under the snake spirit's true dragon pressure, the yang spirit's strength was greatly reduced. It was unable to withstand the sword energy that was full of Taoist qi. In the blink of an eye, the Xianyuan sword energy fell on the celestial master's yang spirit. When the two collided, there was no ripple. In less than a few seconds, the celestial master's yang spirit completely disappeared from the world. After doing this, I didn't stop there. I used the celestial master's word formula to explode the giant black python, turning it into smoke and dust that scattered with the wind. This wasn't the time to relax. I hurried to ask the snake spirit to fly back to my back. Then, I asked Tong Tong to return to the jade bracelet. Then, I put on the black robe on the ground. I whispered to Tong Tong to release some of the monster aura from the jade bracelet, covering my body. I retracted the witchcraft energy barrier around me and sensed for a while. After confirming that there were no flaws, I exhaled and planned to go to the Liu family immediately. Chapter 853. With my current strength, even if their cultivation was slightly higher than mine, they might not be a match for me if we were to fight. Scale insects and beasts were the same as in-soul cultivators. Their strength was generally slightly lower than human cultivators of the same realm, so I didn't care too much. Instead, I was happy. Now that I was disguised as the Liu clan elder, I didn't know if there were any flaws. These Liu clan people could verify it. If they couldn't pass off the fake as the real one, I would have room to adjust. While I was in deep thought, a few people landed in front of me. The leader was wearing a purple robe. His triangular eyes revealed his crafty nature, and he wore a smile on his white-bearded face. After he landed, he didn't say anything, but looked around, as if he was looking for me and the snake's spirit. However, I had already changed into the appearance of the black-clothed elder, and the snake's spirit had returned to my back. Naturally, he wouldn't know our whereabouts. After patrolling for a while, he suddenly turned to look at the 3 people behind him and angrily rebuked, "Didn't you say that the 7th elder was detained here?" After I searched through the black-clothed elder's memory, I found out that the purple-clothed elder was also an elder of the Liu clan. He was older than the black-clothed elder and ranked 5th among the elders. He was a young god celestial master at the middle stage. This person was known for being vicious and ruthless. He was also very scheming, so he didn't get along well with the black-clothed elder. However, I didn't know why he had come to rescue the black-clothed elder. After thinking for a while, I understood. The 5th elder and the black-clothed elder were brothers born from the same mother. However, the black-clothed elder's cultivation talent was slightly inferior, and because of his extremely ugly appearance, he was sent to guard the Liu clan's periphery. The 5th elder, on the other hand, was very talented and had a high status in the clan. However, for some reason, when Hui Hui's blood was distributed, the 5th elder didn't receive it. Instead, the black-clothed elder, who was inferior to him in every aspect, was rewarded. This made the fifth elder very dissatisfied. However, this was the decision of the Snake King, and the fifth elder didn't dare to disobey the Snake King. He could only secretly make things difficult for the black-clothed elder, looking for an opportunity to snatch Hui Hui's blood. In that case, he had come for this. After understanding the situation, I was secretly delighted. If the relationship between the fifth elder and the black-clothed elder was extremely good, and they were very close, perhaps they would discover some abnormalities. The current situation was perfect. They normally didn't get along with each other. Even if they discovered some small problems, they wouldn't have the heart to ask about it. This gave me a chance to take advantage of the situation. Just like that, I didn't bother with them and headed towards the Liu family. I hadn't gone far when the man caught up with me. He stood beside me and asked me what had just happened. Hearing his question, I didn't panic. After thinking for a while, I ignored him. In any case, these two brothers didn't get along with each other, so it was reasonable for me to ignore him. After all, I was just an impersonator. The more I spoke, the more mistakes I would make. Not saying anything would actually make me look more real. As I had thought, the fifth brother didn't suspect anything when he saw that I didn't pay attention to him. His expression became gloomy, as if he didn't have the mood to investigate any further. He quickly flew in the direction of the Liu family. I had planned to follow him, but after thinking about it, I realized that if I flew, I would inevitably use my cultivation. If he detected me, it would be very bad. So I chose to walk slowly. After walking for 4 hours, I finally arrived at the Liu family's village. Along the way, I kept searching for the situation of the Liu family in my mind. According to the black-clothed elder's memory, there were 7 elders in the Liu family, all of whom had the cultivation of Yang God Celestial Master. The black-clothed elder was ranked at the bottom, while the other 6 were above the middle stage of Yang God. These elders were all members of the Liu family's royal family. I had already expected this when he had mentioned Hui Hui's blood. However, in addition to this, I also learned a piece of news that shocked me. The current Snake King of the Liu family had the cultivation of Changju. Although he hadn't transformed into a real dragon, his strength was enough to frighten people. It seemed that I had to be more careful in this operation. After thinking about it, I decided to avoid meeting the Snake King as much as possible in order to avoid being detected. It had been less than 3 days since Swan had appeared, and this place was a dangerous place. I couldn't stay here for long. With this thought in mind, I went directly to the Liu family's palace. I planned to see Hui Hui first and investigate the situation. After a quarter of an hour, I arrived at the dungeon where Hui Hui was being held. The 2 black-armored young men guarding the door had the cultivation of Shuyao. When they saw me, they quickly came over and bowed to me. Then, they asked me why I had come here. Although the black-clothed elder wasn't very popular after the other elders, his status was still high in the eyes of ordinary people. I didn't pay attention to them and just waved my hand, indicating that they should lead the way. Unexpectedly, the 2 black-armored young men bowed again and told me that Hui Hui was no longer in the dungeon. Earlier, the Snake King had sent someone to take her away. I was stunned and asked them if they knew where Hui Hui had been taken. The 2 of them shook their heads, indicating that they had no right to ask about Hui Hui's affairs. As such, it was a little troublesome. I could only retreat from the dungeon. After thinking for a while on the way, I got a useful clue from the black-clothed elder's memory. Previously, the Snake King would always bring Hui Hui to a mysterious valley. No one was allowed to enter that place except for the Snake King. Every time he brought Hui Hui there, the Snake King would take a drop of Hui Hui's blood essence. His temperament was also different from before. It seemed that the Snake King had ordered people to take Hui Hui away to that mysterious valley. After understanding the situation, I thought for a while and rushed to the valley. When I arrived, I saw 5 or 6 white-haired old men standing outside the valley. They wore robes of different colors, and one of them was the 5th elder who had come to rescue Hui Hui. According to the black-clothed elder's memory, these people were the other 6 elders. Every time the Snake King came out, he would distribute the blood essence he had obtained here. However, The blood essence in Hui Hui's body was too powerful. If it was given to these elders, not only would it not help them improve their cultivation, but it would also backfire on them. For this reason, every time the Snake King got the blood essence, he would suck a part of it and then divide the rest into 3 parts for the other 3. However, these 3 people didn't take turns. It was all according to the Snake King's preference. Therefore, every time the Snake King entered the valley, several elders would gather there, hoping that they could be the lucky ones. Although these 7 elders appeared to be in harmony on the surface, they had secretly drawn in their clansmen and divided their forces. However, due to the Snake King's coercion, they didn't dare to fight openly. Thinking to this point, I roughly swept a glance at the crowd behind me. I already had a rough understanding of the situation of these people. The first one to notice me was the 5th elder. He shouted from afar, "Old 7, on the day the king distributed the blood essence, you were so slack. If you had come a little later, today's matter would have nothing to do with you." As he spoke, although the 5th elder had a smile on his face, he didn't hide the hostility and disgust in his eyes. It was obvious that he still held a grudge against the black-clothed elder for taking the blood essence. I knew that there was discord between them, so I didn't pay attention to it. I walked into the crowd and greeted the other elders one by one. Then I stood aside. At this moment, the elders were all looking in the direction of the valley, but they didn't talk to each other. When the 5th elder saw that I didn't respond to him, he didn't speak anymore. His expression became more and more anxious. It was obvious that he was looking forward to Hui Hui's blood essence. After about an hour, a figure finally appeared in the valley. It was a man in a yellow robe. He was carrying a woman in ragged clothes on his shoulder. From afar, I could feel that the woman's aura was very weak. She must have suffered a lot of injuries. It wasn't difficult to guess the identity of these 2 people. The woman on his shoulder was naturally Hui Hui, and the man in the golden robe must be the Snake King. What surprised me was that the Snake King looked very young. Based on his appearance, he seemed to be about the same age as me. I didn't know if he was like this or if he was deliberately maintaining his youthful appearance. At this moment, I suddenly felt a chill on my back. The snake spirit must have sensed Hui Hui's aura and wanted to come out. There were 6 young god celestial masters here, and one of them was even a young god. Although the snake spirit had turned into a real dragon, his cultivation was only at the early stage of young god. The pressure of his real dragon could intimidate the elders, but it was useless against the Snake King. If he appeared rashly, not only would he not be able to take Hui Hui away, but we would also be trapped in a quagmire. With this thought in mind, I whispered my thoughts to the snake spirit. After listening to me, he calmed down and didn't make any unusual movements. After comforting the snake spirit, a voice suddenly came from the crowd. "Old 7, what are you doing? Why don't you greet the Snake King?" Hearing this, I came back to my senses and looked forward. The person who had spoken was the 5th elder. At this moment, several elders were kneeling in front of the Snake King. Just now, I was so focused on comforting the snake spirit that I didn't notice their actions. It was obvious that the 5th elder had found an opportunity to quickly scold them. I naturally understood what he was thinking. He just wanted to take the opportunity to make me punish the Snake King and lose a competitor. After hearing his voice, the elders who were kneeling down turned to look at me. Even the Snake King, who was approaching, looked a little displeased. Only then did I react. The Liu family had a strict hierarchy, and there were many relative etiquettes. It was disrespectful for me to not kneel in front of the Snake King. It was a small matter if I couldn't get Hui Hui's blood essence, but if the Snake King noticed me and discovered my fake identity, it would be difficult to clean up the mess. I couldn't help but feel nervous. I gritted my teeth and thought about it. A real man should know when to yield and when to stand tall. It was just kneeling. In order to save Hui Hui, it was okay to suffer a little. With this thought in mind, I still knelt. Seeing this, the Snake King calmed down and said faintly, "I heard that a messenger of the Qingqiu clan came today, and you were the one who received him. I wonder what Chief Qingqiu has to tell me." Hearing this, I let out a long breath and told the Snake King the news I had heard from the Fox Girl. After listening to me, There was no expression on his face. He just nodded slightly and muttered, "It seems that we have to hurry up." I didn't know what he meant by that, but after he finished speaking, he glanced at Hui Hui on the ground. Presumably, he was referring to the matter of extracting Hui Hui's blood essence. In that case, I had to save Hui Hui as soon as possible. While I was thinking, the Snake King spoke again. "You did a good job in receiving the messenger today, so I won't punish you. I'm a little tired, so I'll let you bring this girl back." Then, the Snake King ignored the crowd and turned around, disappearing on the spot. However, after he left, the people in front of me looked confused. They must be wondering why the Snake King didn't give them the blood essence today. Fortunately, these people weren't inflexible. They turned around and chased after the Snake King. Chapter 854. The fifth elder wasn't a good person. Since he was staring at Wee Wee, he didn't have a good plan. I planned to wait until the Serpent King's aura completely disappeared. I would go there and take Wee Wee away. Then, I would find a chance to leave the Liu family. I had this thought in my mind, but before the Snake King's aura had completely disappeared, before I could take any action, the fifth elder suddenly pounced forward. He lifted Hui Hui with one hand and flew towards the direction of the valley. I knew it wasn't good. I didn't care if my aura would leak or not. I ran as fast as the wind and chased after him. I didn't expect that I would be blocked by a barrier when I was about to pass the valley. From the aura, I sensed if I wanted to get through the barrier, I would have to use monster energy. There was monster energy in the jade bracelet, and my body was also shrouded in thick monster energy. However, I didn't have the power to control it. Fortunately, there were no Liu members guarding the barrier. I directly summoned the serpent spirit and asked him if he could open the barrier. Although the serpent spirit's original form was also a snake, he had a miraculous destiny. He had been born from the monster clan. When I first saw him, he was surrounded by Yin energy instead of monster chi. Now that he had turned into a real dragon, he didn't have a single wisp of monster chi around him. He pondered for a while and asked me for the jade bracelet. Then, he summoned his eyes to release the monster chi from the bracelet. He controlled the monster chi to attack the barrier in front of him. At first, the monster energy moved very slowly. However, when it approached the barrier, the serpent's spirit roared. The monster energy sped up and hit the barrier in the blink of an eye. At the moment of impact, the barrier rippled violently. Then, the center of the barrier was torn open, leaving a big hole that was big enough for 4 or 5 people to pass through. I was happy and hurried to get through the hole. The serpent spirit followed me. I wanted to call the serpent spirit to return to me, but he didn't stop. He continued to chase after the fifth elder. I hesitated for a while, but decided to follow him. I didn't let the serpent spirit come out because I was afraid that he would get anxious. If he didn't agree with me, he would start a massacre. I was afraid he wouldn't be able to find Hui Hui. Now that we had found Hui Hui, it was okay to let the serpent spirit come out. The two of us chased for a few kilometers, but the aura of the fifth elder and Hui Hui suddenly disappeared. The valley in front of us was surrounded by a dense forest, and we couldn't find the fifth elder. Moreover, he was at the intermediate stage of Yang's spirit realm. I couldn't sense him. While I was frowning, there was a slight explosion in the forest in the distance. The snake spirit and I exchanged looks. Then we lifted our feet and dashed toward the source of the sound. The serpent spirit and the serpent spirit. The serpent spirit and the serpent spirit, Hui Hui, elder, and Hui Hui. He, the serpent spirit, I elder Wu. The stone pillars were engraved with dragon patterns. Hui Hui was placed in the middle of the 9 dragon pillars, while the fifth elder was sitting under the dragon pillar with his eyes closed. His mouth was moving slightly, as if he was chanting something. Based on the current situation, it was obvious that there was some sort of formation between the 9 pillars with dragon tattoos carved on them. Furthermore, it seemed like the fifth elder was activating this formation. I couldn't tell what the function of the formation was just by looking at it. But no matter what it was, it couldn't be a good thing for Hui Hui, who was in the middle of the formation. The serpent spirit seemed to be aware of this. He looked up to the sky and roared. Then, he turned into a real dragon. He moved so fast that I didn't have time to stop him. By the time I reacted, he had already rushed toward the fifth elder, and his huge dragon mouth was about to fall on the serpent spirit's body. However, the fifth elder was at the intermediate stage of Yang spirit realm. He was suddenly attacked. He immediately bowed and stood up. As he retreated, he looked at the serpent spirit. When he saw the serpent spirit's appearance, he was shocked and panicked. Then, he suddenly became happy. After avoiding the serpent spirit's attack, he stood in the distance and stared at the serpent spirit. I didn't know what he was thinking. The serpent spirit was obviously angrier after its attack failed. It swept its tail and hit the fifth elder again. The dragon tail swayed very quickly. In addition, the fifth elder didn't know what he was thinking. He was hit by the serpent spirit and was thrown far away. He fell to the ground. However, the fifth elder was not an ordinary person. This attack didn't seriously injure him. Instead, it aroused his courage. The next second, the momentum around his body surged. Cyan demon chi covered his whole body. He continued to stare at the serpent spirit. His triangular eyes were filled with endless greed. He didn't hide his eyes at all. Obviously, he was coveting the serpent spirit. After thinking about it for a while, I understood that he had brought Hui Hui here because he coveted the remaining 7 drops of blood in her body. As a member of the Liu clan, the ultimate purpose of obtaining Hui Hui's blood and improving his cultivation was not to transform into a dragon. Now that he had encountered the serpent spirit, he could see that the serpent spirit had transformed into a real dragon. However, its cultivation base was only at the Yang spirit realm. If it swallowed the serpent spirit, it was possible for it to cross the chasm. How could it not be happy? I didn't care about his thoughts. While the serpent spirit was fighting with him, I flew to Hui Hui, who was lying in the middle of the dragon pillar. Soon, I landed next to her. I didn't hurry to take her away. Instead, I put my hands on her abdomen to check her injury. Soon, I furrowed my brow. Hui Hui's injury was much more serious than I had imagined. The monster race and the human race had different structures, and their spiritual energy was also different. I could check her situation, but I couldn't treat her. The only thing I could do now was to take her away from here as soon as possible and discuss with the serpent spirit how to treat her. After taking Hui Hui away from the dragon pillar formation, the serpent spirit was still entangled with the fifth elder. It would be difficult for it to get away in a short time. Moreover, the serpent spirit's roar was very loud. It might have alerted the Liu clan. If we continued in this stalemate, it would be difficult for us to get away when the Liu clan heard the commotion and rushed over. With that in mind, I summoned Tong Tong and asked her to take good care of Hui Hui. I quickly took out the armor remodeling sword and stepped on the 9-star heavenly dipper. When my last step landed, the abundant armor remodeling sword energy slashed at the fifth elder and joined the battle. Seeing the armor remodeling sword, the serpent spirit turned its body and moved out of the way. Then, it swung its dragon claw at the fifth elder's body. At that moment, the fifth elder was pincered by me and the serpent spirit, so he couldn't move. In the blink of an eye, he roared angrily and turned into a giant green python. Under the illumination of the thick sword energy, the green scales looked colorful. It stood in the same place, as if it didn't care about the armor remodeling sword energy and the dragon claw. It didn't even try to dodge. Very quickly, the dragon claw and the armor remodeling sword energy hit the green python's body at the same time. In an instant, a loud explosion resounded through the forest and stirred up the dust on the ground. After a few seconds, the forest returned to peace and the dust that was stirred up also dissipated. I then saw the green python's appearance clearly. It stood firmly in the same place and didn't move at all. The scales on its body weren't damaged at all. Even though I had expected it when I saw that it didn't try to dodge, I was still shocked when I saw that it was unharmed. I didn't think that the green python scales would be so indestructible. I took a deep breath. After I had advanced to the sun god realm, the armor remodeling sword energy was much weaker to me. After all, it was just a normal sword. It was almost impossible to kill a sun god celestial master with it. Thus, I kept the armor remodeling sword and spat out the Xian Yuan sword from my mouth. The moment the Xian Yuan sword appeared, I noticed that the green python's body moved back a little. It was probably startled by the divine weapon's aura. In the next second, the green python angrily roared at me. "Audacious human, you dare to kill my Lu tribe's elder." The technique that I had used just now wasn't the Lu tribe's technique. Combined with what had happened outside the Lu tribe, it wasn't hard to see that I was a human. Since he had already seen through me, there was no need for me to hide it. I casually replied, "Didn't you always want to find a chance to kill your seventh brother? I have already helped you get rid of the pain in your heart. Why are you still so angry?" My tone was slightly mocking. The fifth elder seemed to think that I had seen through him. The killing intent in his eyes intensified. He opened his bloody mouth and pounced towards me. Unexpectedly, with his huge body, his speed wasn't any slower than mine. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of me. At that moment, I didn't dare to hesitate. I pushed off the ground and jumped to the side to avoid the attack. The green python's attack didn't succeed. The huge snakehead fiercely smashed into the ground. The ground where it had been previously was splashed with mud and soil, and it sank a few meters. Before I could steady myself, the snakehead changed direction and pounced towards me again. It didn't slow down at all. I had no choice but to leap into the air to avoid the attack again. However, this time I didn't completely dodge. The Taoist qi in my body circulated crazily and continuously sent it into the Xian Yuan sword. At the same time, the Xian Yuan sword was filled with Taoist qi. After I landed on the ground and stabilized my body, I waved my hand and the Xian Yuan sword qi slashed towards the green python's back. The green python seemed to realize that it couldn't resist the Xian Yuan sword qi. It hastily transformed into its human form. The Xian Yuan sword qi instantly lost its target. In the blink of an eye, it slashed through the air. However, the dense forest behind the fifth elder wasn't spared. It was a complete mess a few hundred meters away. Chapter 855. After dodging my attack, the fifth elder glared at me. Then, he flew toward the serpent spirit in the air. Since his action was too sudden, the serpent spirit didn't react and landed on his back. After he reacted, the serpent spirit turned its head and wanted to bite him. However, the fifth elder's strength wasn't ordinary. He controlled his body and suppressed the serpent spirit at the same time. The serpent spirit couldn't get rid of him. However, his behavior puzzled me, so I didn't rush to attack him. Instead, I focused my attention on his movements. After a while, he stopped pestering the serpent spirit and flew toward the 9 dragon pillars. After being harassed by him, the serpent spirit's eyes were filled with anger. It twisted its body and chased after him. Seeing this, I furrowed my brows and had a bad premonition. Sure enough, after the fifth elder flew toward the 9 dragon pillars, he stopped. He seemed to be waiting for the serpent spirit to chase after him. There was a strange look on his face. Seeing this, I cursed inwardly. The fifth elder must be plotting something. The position of the 9 dragon pillars must be unusual. With that thought in mind, I immediately spoke to stop the serpent spirit from chasing after him. However, the serpent spirit was still angry and didn't pay attention to my words. His behavior made my heart tighten. In a flash, the serpent spirit flew in front of the fifth elder and opened its big mouth to bite him. Unexpectedly, an evil smile appeared on the fifth elder's face. In the blink of an eye, he jumped out. At the same time, a ray of golden light shot out from the 9 dragon pillars into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the golden light fell again and wrapped around the 9 dragon pillars, forming a sealed space. Seeing this, I had some thoughts. The fifth elder had placed Hui Hui in the middle of the 9 dragon pillars. Obviously, he wanted to use some method to force the blood out of her body. Now that the serpent spirit was trapped inside, it must be for the same reason. At this time, the golden light fell again in the sealed space, covering the serpent spirit's huge body. The serpent spirit opened its big mouth and glared at the fifth elder with its scarlet eyes. Its golden body writhed in the space, looking as if it was in great pain. However, I didn't hear the roar of a dragon. I couldn't even sense the aura of the spirit snake. It seemed that this sealed space could isolate everything. It was really frightening. This was something that even enlightened Master Guan's formation could not achieve. Nobody knew what these 9 dragon pillars were, but the golden light that they emitted had such power. While he was deep in thought, the snake's spirit inside moved again. He seemed to sense that the golden light inside was very harmful to him. He no longer looked at the 5th elder. Instead, he twisted his body and crashed into the golden barrier. However, every time he collided with the golden light barrier, there was only a slight ripple on it, and there was no further reaction. That Elder Wu was someone who had lived for almost 1,000 years. Furthermore, he was a scheming person, so he would definitely not do anything that he was not confident in. Since he had lured the serpent spirit into the 9 dragon pillars, he was certain that the serpent spirit would not be able to break the golden barrier. If that was the case, it would be impossible to escape by relying on the snake spirit's power alone. With this thought in mind, I raised my sword and flew toward the 5th elder. Since he could activate the light formation, he must know how to dispel it. As long as I could control him, the serpent spirit would be able to escape. In the blink of an eye, I arrived in front of the 5th elder. I raised the Xian Yuan sword and slashed at him. This time, I didn't send my Tao energy into the formation. Firstly, the Tao energy in my body was almost exhausted, and I couldn't support the Xian Yuan sword's consumption. Secondly, the 5th elder's body was made of flesh and blood. I was afraid that he wouldn't be able to resist the power of the Xian Yuan sword's Tao energy. If I made the slightest mistake and killed him, no one would be able to dispel the golden light formation. The 5th elder seemed to see through my misgivings. He snorted, and green smoke rose from his hands. He twisted his body and dodged the Xian Yuan sword. At the same time, his hands, which were wrapped in a thick, monstrous aura, reached for my neck. I didn't panic. Instead, I turned around and increased the strength in my hands. I held the Xian Yuan sword horizontally in front of my chest in an attempt to block the attack. In the blink of an eye, the pair of dark green hands pressed on the Xian Yuan sword. The Xian Yuan sword was an ancient divine weapon with the power to expel all evils. Even if I didn't use my Tao energy, a monster like him wouldn't feel good if he touched it. Sure enough, when his hands touched the sword, the thick, monstrous aura turned into white smoke and dissipated in the air. In less than a few seconds, the 5th elder let out an anguished wail and immediately retracted his hands. He retreated repeatedly with a twisted and embarrassed expression. Now that he knew how powerful the Xian Yuan sword was, he didn't dare to attack me. He stood where he was and looked at the snake spirit from time to time. His behavior made me more worried about the snake spirit, so I also looked at him. After dozens of seconds, the snake spirit was lying on the ground with wounds all over his body. His blood had dyed the ground red, and his bright eyes looked a little blurry. However, he didn't give up struggling. He trembled and propped up his body, trying to hit the golden barrier again. I felt sorry for the snake spirit, and I hated the 5th elder even more. I raised the Xian Yuan sword and slashed at him one more time. This time he was smart. He didn't want to fight me face to face. Instead, he leaped and flew into the air. I looked up and chased after him. The 5th elder didn't panic when he saw me chasing him. Instead, he chanted a strange sound. The rhythm of the sound was almost the same as the one I'd heard when I first arrived here. It seemed he didn't want to waste time with me. He wanted to force the blood out of the snake spirit's body as soon as possible. I didn't dare to hide anymore. I quickly retrieved the Xian Yuan sword into my body. I closed my eyes and moved the witchcraft energy in my heavenly veins to my life palace. I wanted to use the witchcraft energy transformation technique. After a few seconds, the yang spirit in my life palace spat out a thick silver needle. At the same time, a similar silver needle appeared in my palm. As soon as the silver needle appeared, I felt powerless. However, I didn't care about it. I focused on the silver needle in my hand. In the next second, the silver needle was formed. I didn't waste any time and threw it at the fifth elder. The fifth elder, who was chanting the spell, seemed to realize that danger was approaching. He stopped chanting and looked at me. When the thick silver needle left his hand, it separated into hundreds of small silver needles. The fifth elder didn't have any room to dodge. He might have realized that the power of the silver needles wasn't ordinary, but he couldn't dodge them. He turned around and transformed into his original form, trying to use his scales to block the hundreds of silver needles. I had seen the defensive power of its scales before. However, the power of the armor-removing sword that was full of Tao energy couldn't be compared to my witchcraft energy transformation technique. My technique was enough to kill a young god celestial master at the intermediate stage. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of silver needles were in front of the giant python. The giant python seemed to have an idea. It twisted its body and took the initiative to meet the needles. However, to its surprise, the silver needles weren't blocked by the hard scales. Instead, they all drilled into its body. It was really a bit whimsical. My witchcraft energy transformation technique had the effect of the young god. Moreover, my young god was a combination of Tao energy and witchcraft energy. Its strength was comparable to the peak of the young god. After being hit, the giant green python's body became slightly erratic. It swayed in the air for a few seconds before heavily hitting the ground. When it landed, it returned to its human form. It lay on the ground and kept twitching. Dark red blood kept gushing out of its mouth. He looked like he was seriously injured, but I wasn't sure if he had any other tricks up his sleeves, so I landed next to him and channeled the remaining chi in my body into my palm. Then I slammed my palm on his chest. After doing all this, the Tao energy in my body was exhausted. My witchcraft energy was also exhausted, and my body was a little weak. However, I didn't dare to show any signs of fatigue. I had to pretend to be calm. I squatted down and said coldly, "If you don't stop that strange formation, I'll destroy your young god." After listening to me, the fifth elder didn't panic. Instead, he smiled and replied weakly, "This blood-devouring formation was originally designed for the dragon clan. It will never stop unless the blood in its body is forced out. I just use a secret technique. Just wait to collect the dragon's corpse." After that, he didn't say anything else. I didn't know if he was telling the truth or not. However, after thinking about it carefully, he was like an arrow at the end of its flight. Maybe he wouldn't lie to me. If that was the case, there was really no way to save the snake spirit. Thinking of this, I couldn't calm down. However, I was exhausted, so I could only call Tong Tong and ask him to destroy his young god. At this time, the fifth elder couldn't move. In terms of strength, he wasn't strong enough to compete with Tong Tong. When Tong Tong saw my gloomy face, he didn't hesitate. He released pure Yin energy from his hands and pressed them on the fifth elder's life palace. At this moment, he had no strength to resist. He let out a low cry, and his body twitched a few times before he lost his vitality. At the same time, his drifting young god was held in Tong Tong's hand. The Yin energy in Tong Tong's hand became stronger. In just a moment, the fifth elder's young god disappeared from this world. After that, I went to the blood-devouring formation and stared at the snake's spirit inside, frowning. Although I was angry and anxious, I couldn't save the snake's spirit. At this moment, I could only resign myself to fate. I hoped that after the snake's spirit's blood was extracted, it would still have a breath left. While I was thinking, the golden light in the blood-devouring formation became brighter. The snake's spirit raised its head and slammed it on the ground. It seemed to want to use this self-mutilation to divert its pain. When Tong Tong saw this, he quietly came over and begged me to save the snake's spirit. Chapter 856. I didn't know how to respond to Tong Tong, so I could only hope that the snake's spirit was lucky. As I thought about this, I couldn't help but feel sorrowful. At the same time, I was also thinking about something. The snake spirit's original form was a winged dragon. In the ancient war, the Yellow Emperor had ridden a winged dragon to kill Chiyu. It wasn't just a coincidence that I had met the snake spirit. According to my previous speculation about the ancient war, the snake spirit might have been a chess piece that Emperor Ku had arranged to be by my side. If that was the case, the snake spirit would one day turn into a winged dragon, and he would be very useful in the future. Thus, he wouldn't die so easily. As I thought about this, I calmed down and took out the jade bracelet to absorb the true dragon chi inside to replenish my strength. As for Tong Tong, she still wore a distressed face. I wanted to explain to her what I was thinking, but this matter involved many things, so I didn't know where to start. While I was thinking, Tong Tong suddenly screamed. I hurried to look at the formation. After struggling a few times, the snake spirit seemed to have lost all his strength. He lay on the ground with blood gushing out from his mouth and nose. At the same time, a drop of golden blood flowed out from his tail. It hung at the end of his tail and didn't fall for a long time. Soon, another drop of golden blood flowed out from his tailbone. Then, the process of the blood flowing out from his feet, hands, and cervical vertebrae repeated 8 times. After 8 drops of blood were drawn out, the snake spirit's body became thinner. He looked extremely haggard. Even I couldn't help but feel anxious. I couldn't predict what would happen next. At this moment, the snake spirit's pair of horns suddenly trembled. It seemed that the blood in between his eyebrows was about to leave his body. My heart tightened. The blood in between his eyebrows was the snake spirit's lifeblood, and it was also the last drop. If this drop of blood left his body, how could the snake spirit still be alive? While I was nervous, I also had some doubts. The number of blood essences was usually 10, but the snake spirit had only 9 drops. I didn't know why. While I was thinking, the serpent spirit in the blood-devouring formation woke up. I didn't have time to worry about the amount of blood I had and turned to look at him. At this time, the spirit serpent was wrapped in an indescribable aura. It didn't care about the blood essence that was seeping out of its body. After opening its eyes, it let out a roar and stood up with its head held high. On its huge dragon head, there was actually a shadow. After a careful examination, I discovered that although this phantom looked similar to the spirit serpent, it had a pair of 10-meter-long wings on its back. Back in Chiyo's tomb, when he mistakenly entered the primordial battlefield, the serpent spirit had produced a similar shadow. It was Yinglong. At this moment, the serpent spirit was on the brink of life and death. The sleeping winged dragon phantom in its body was finally stimulated. The worry in my heart was finally relieved. Previously, the 5th elder had said that the blood-devouring array was specially designed for the dragon clan, but the serpent spirit's true form was a winged dragon, the symbol of the dragon clan's strongest power. The blood-devouring formation was effective against ordinary dragons, but it was not effective against Yinglong's absolute power. Although it was only a winged dragon phantom, it could still trigger a trace of Yinglong's power. It wasn't something that the blood-devouring formation could resist. Just as I was thinking about this, the spirit serpent moved again. He raised his head and roared, swallowing the drops of blood essence that had been extracted from his body. Then, he twisted his huge body and hit the golden barrier. With a crisp sound, the golden barrier shattered, and the surrounding golden light dissipated. Now, the spirit serpent had finally escaped from the blood-devouring formation. As soon as he got out of the formation, the winged dragon phantom behind the spirit serpent couldn't be maintained and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The spirit serpent returned to his original appearance and fell to the ground. I quickly went forward to check on his injuries. After a thorough examination, I found that although the spirit serpent had retrieved his blood essence, it hadn't returned to its original position. Instead, it was colliding in his body and could break out at any time. It was the first time I had encountered such a situation, so I didn't know how to solve it. I turned to ask Tong Tong, but she was also a loss and couldn't give me a valuable answer. It hadn't been easy for the spirit serpent to get out of the blood-devouring formation. If his blood essence left his body again, his life would be in danger. In a moment of desperation, I suddenly remembered that the death scripture contained many cultivation techniques. Perhaps I could find a way to help the spirit serpent stabilize his injuries. As such, I didn't care too much and took out the death scripture from Shang Liu's pouch. After searching for a while, I didn't find anything. Just then, I heard a weak voice next to me. I turned and saw that Hui Hui had woken up, but she was powerless and couldn't stand up. She could only crawl towards us. I quickly got up and walked her side. I carefully helped her to sit next to the spirit serpent. Then, I asked her if there was a good way to save the spirit serpent. Hui Hui didn't answer me immediately. Instead, she stretched out her trembling hand and gently stroked the spirit serpent's head. She murmured, "Brother Long, it's really fate that makes fun of people. I thought I would never see you again. I didn't expect that you would find this place. It's just that we've met today, and it's going to be a life and death parting." Her words made me frown. Logically speaking, although Hui Hui's injuries were quite serious, it wasn't incurable. What she had revealed earlier seemed to have a way to save the spirit serpent. Why was there a life and death parting? Could it be that she was going to sacrifice herself to save the spirit serpent? That was what I thought, but I didn't ask. If it was really as I had expected, I really didn't know how to intervene. Compared to the spirit serpent, Hui Hui's importance was much lower. Moreover, the spirit serpent had become like this because of Hui Hui. Psychologically speaking, I naturally hoped that the spirit serpent could survive. Of course, that was just my selfish thought. There were feelings between the spirit serpent and Hui Hui, although the spirit serpent had never mentioned it. Judging from his furious expression when he had sensed that Hui Hui might be in danger, the spirit serpent's feelings for Hui Hui were far from what he had said. He had taken such a big risk to save Hui Hui. At this time, Hui Hui could also choose to sacrifice herself to save the spirit serpent. Feelings were mutual. Give me a peach, and I'll repay you with a jade. This was a normal thing. Therefore, after realizing this, I still didn't stop him. Of course, even if I did, Hui Hui wouldn't stop. So I stood quietly on the side, waiting for Hui Hui's next move. After a while, she turned her head and told me that if I wanted to save the spirit serpent, I had to use blood essence to guide it. However, the blood essence used had to be compatible with the spirit serpent. After listening to her, I roughly understood the treatment method, but I still had doubts in my heart. Although Hui Hui showed signs of transforming into a flood dragon, she was still a scale insect of the mortal world. The spirit serpent had already transformed into a true dragon. I was afraid that her blood essence wouldn't be compatible with it. With that in mind, I asked Hui Hui about the details. Hui Hui didn't speak immediately. Instead, she fell silent, as if she was weighing the pros and cons in her heart. After a while, she raised her head again and said in a weak voice, "Brother Zhou, promise me that you must save Brother Long." I would save the spirit serpent without her saying anything. However, there seemed to be another meaning in her words. It seemed that she felt that if she told me the reason, my determination to save the spirit serpent would be shaken. I was a little surprised, but then I understood. Hui Hui didn't really understand the relationship between me and the spirit serpent, so she was worried. After I nodded and agreed, Hui Hui finally forced a smile on her face. She then told me that her own blood essence couldn't be compatible with the spirit serpent, but she had a drop of the spirit serpent's blood essence in her body. This blood essence could be used to save the spirit serpent. Hearing this, I remembered that when the spirit serpent was in the blood-devouring formation, I only saw 9 drops of blood essence. I thought that it was because of his special physique that he only had 9 drops of blood essence. I didn't expect that the 10th drop of blood essence was in Hui Hui's body. After asking, I learned that when the spirit serpent had first met Hui Hui, she had been seriously injured in order to escape from the Liu clan and was on the verge of death. It was the spirit serpent who had used a drop of its own blood essence to save Hui Hui's life. Since then, the spirit serpent's blood essence had remained in Hui Hui's body. After listening to her, I was suddenly enlightened. No wonder the Liu clan coveted Hui Hui's blood essence. In fact, it was the spirit serpent's blood essence that had brought about a disaster. Hui Hui had shown signs of turning into a Jiao dragon because of the spirit serpent's blood essence, just like what the Liu clan elder had said. In the end, what the Liu clan coveted was the spirit serpent's blood essence. It was no wonder that they were so crazy. The spirit serpent had the bloodline of the winged dragon, which was a fatal attraction to the Liu clan. I now had a vague answer to the spirit serpent's indifference to Hui. Over the years, the spirit serpent had been by my side and had experienced a lot. Somehow, he should have felt that he was extraordinary and knew that he and Hui were people from two different worlds. Perhaps that was why he had chosen to let go of this relationship, but he hadn't expected that he would encounter such a thing in the end. As for Hui, after talking about the past, she was already sobbing. After a long time, she said to me, "Brother Zhou, Hui has a request. I hope Brother Zhou will agree to it." After listening to the story between her and the spirit serpent, I was quite moved. Now that she was willing to sacrifice herself to save the spirit serpent, as long as it was within my power, I naturally wouldn't refuse. Chapter 857. Hui's words made sense. When the snake spirit woke up, I would immediately take him away from here. But she told me not to tell the snake spirit about Hui's death. I was silent for a moment. It wasn't that I didn't understand what she meant, but if I did that, it would be too unfair to Hui. She seemed to see through my thoughts and quickly said, "Hui is a person who is about to die. Thanks to Brother Long for saving me. It is Hui's great fortune to return my life to Brother Long. Brother Long's blood has been in Hui's body for hundreds of years. This return also means that Hui can accompany Brother Long at any time. Hui can die without regrets. Hui only wishes to be with Brother Long in the next life." Her words moved me. It reminded me of Wu Yu's words in Chiyo's tomb. It could be said that since ancient times, the most bitter people in the world were infatuated with love. Tong Tong, who was next to me, couldn't bear to see this. She turned around and flew back into the jade bracelet. After Hui said this, she gritted her teeth and used the last of her strength to force out the blood that the snake spirit had given her. She held the drop of blood in her hands and handed it to me. Her eyes were blurred and she couldn't speak. However, I also knew what she meant. She wanted to ask me to cure the snake spirit. I nodded and responded softly. Hui squeezed out a smile and her hands fell naturally. Although Hui had left, the most important thing right now was to treat the snake spirit as soon as possible to avoid any accidents. I let out a long sigh and calmed myself down. Then, a strong Taoist aura appeared on my hands, and I injected the blood into the snake spirit's body. This was far from enough. The snake spirit's injuries were too serious and couldn't repair itself. It needed an external force to guide the blood back to its original position. As such, I didn't delay. The Taoist aura in my body circulated wildly and wrapped around the snake spirit's huge dragon body. After an unknown amount of time, the snake spirit's blood returned to its original position. The huge dragon body gradually returned to its original appearance, but the snake spirit still hadn't woken up. After a long struggle, the Taoist aura in my body was exhausted again. Fortunately, the sound of our fight didn't attract the Liu clan, so there was enough time for us to recover. 2 hours later, the snake spirit finally opened his eyes. The first thing he said was to ask about Hui's situation. I didn't tell him. Instead, I pointed at Hui, who had turned into a little white snake. The spirit snake followed my finger and looked in the direction I was pointing at. Then it moved its head forward and sniffed. Tears welled up in its eyes. It lifted its head and roared. Then he returned to his human form and held Hui in his arms, tears streaming down his face. After a long time, he calmed down and asked, "What's going on?" When he asked, I followed Hui's instructions and told the spirit snake, emphasizing that Hui didn't want him to take revenge. After listening to me, the spirit snake was enraged. It ignored my attempts to stop it and dashed out of the valley. Seeing this, my heart tightened and I immediately chased after him. I stopped in front of him and scolded. "If you go like this, you'll be courting death." Before Hui left, she said that as long as you're alive, she'll be alive. Think about it yourself. Then, I stepped aside and signaled for him to make his own choice. After listening to my words, he was stunned. After a long time, he sighed and said, "I want to take Hui out and bury her properly." Seeing him like this, I felt sorry for him. I walked forward and patted his shoulder. It's not that we don't want to take revenge, but we don't have enough strength to protect ourselves. One day, we'll come back to collect the debt. After I said that, the spirit snake's complexion improved a little. He nodded and handed the little white snake to me. Then, he turned around and transformed back into his original form. He hit the monster energy barrier in front of us. In the blink of an eye, the monster energy barrier shattered, revealing an empty valley. Now that the monster energy in the jade bracelet had been exhausted, we didn't dare to stay here any longer. I flew and landed on the back of the spirit snake, and the two of us flew in the direction we had come from. I signaled the spirit snake to speed up. I didn't slow down and urged the Taoist energy in my body to increase our flying speed. In just 10 seconds, we rushed out of the Liu clan and landed in the place we had come from. After landing, we didn't dare to stop for even a moment, because I faintly felt that someone was chasing behind us. The spirit snake's injury hadn't healed yet. After flying at such a high speed, it had exhausted its strength. At this time, it was lying on the ground and panting. Seeing this, I signaled for him to return to my back. The spirit snake didn't dare to hesitate. He stood up shakily and disappeared. After the spirit snake left, I hid my aura and ran toward the cave where we had lived. After half an hour, I finally arrived at the place. At this time, I didn't find anyone chasing us. Perhaps they hadn't sensed my aura. I leaned against the stone wall in the cave for a long time before summoning the spirit snake. Then, I handed the little white snake from Xiang Lu's pouch to him. After the spirit snake took it, he dug a deep hole in the ground and gently placed the little white snake in it. Then, he bared it bit by bit. After the small grave was built, he said, "Hui, after Brother Long takes revenge for you, I will erect a tombstone for you." Then, he stood up and walked out of the cave with me. He didn't turn his head back. After leaving the cave, we headed directly to the Fire God Temple. Along the way, the spirit snake didn't say a word. After this incident, I felt that he had matured a lot, but I didn't know if it was good or bad. However, everything had a process. No matter who said that their lover had died, they wouldn't be able to recover immediately. When we arrived at the Fire God Temple, it was already evening. I stood in front of the Fire God Temple and didn't enter immediately. Instead, I looked around and didn't find anything strange. Then I stepped in. The furnishings in the temple were still the same. There were no signs that anyone had moved around, but I still couldn't see the contract. Although there were still 2 days before Tao Wu would appear, after the previous incident with the spirit snake, I couldn't wait to see Tao Wu. After entering the Fire God Temple, the spirit snake signaled for me to rest in the outer hall. Perhaps he didn't want to see me and Tao Wu. He was afraid that the scene would bring back memories. I understood his intentions and told him that if he needed anything, he could find me in the inner room. Then I turned around and entered the inner room. Everything in the room was so familiar that I couldn't help but want to take a few more glances. After I calmed down, I sat on the bed and began to adjust my breathing. 2 days later, Tao Wu arrived as promised. At that moment, I intended to get off the bed and walk around. When I opened my eyes, I saw her staring at me with her hands supporting her cheeks. When I saw that, I felt a surge of warmth in my heart. I casually pulled Tao Wu into my embrace. The two of us didn't say anything when we met. Just a hug was enough. After what had happened earlier, I felt a lot of emotions. I looked forward to staying with Tao Wu for a long time. After lingering for a while, I retracted my thoughts and recalled the doubts I had when I came here. I decided to ask Tao Wu about it. Tao Wu seemed to notice that my expression was strange and asked me what was bothering me. I didn't hesitate and casually told her about the many things that I had experienced in the past half a year. I gradually understood my mission and also found out about my relationship with her in my previous life. At this point, Lao AI interrupted me. She snuggled into my embrace and softly said, "Although husband is his reincarnation, that matter has nothing to do with husband. To be able to become husband and wife in this life is Lao AI's greatest fortune. Husband, please don't take the past to heart." Hearing her words, my heart warmed. With such a beautiful wife, what more could I ask for? However, when she mentioned marrying me, it made me want to confirm something with her. With that in mind, I asked Tao Wu if our marriage was a coincidence or if someone had done it on purpose. After hearing that, Tao Wu's face showed a trace of disappointment. When I saw her like that, I immediately explained that for the past half a year, I had always felt that I was a chess piece. I only wanted to know who the chess player was and what he was planning. I wasn't doubting the relationship between us. After hearing that, Tao Wu's expression changed. She paused and told me that she also didn't know about this matter. It was just that someone had asked her to hand over the jade bracelet and the death scripture to me. As for why, that person didn't explain in detail. Hearing that, I quickly asked, was that person Emperor Ku, Shang-Chi, or Nangong? Unexpectedly, Tao Wu shook her head and told me that she hadn't seen that person's face. She also didn't tell her the reason and simply mentioned that it was Emperor Yan's last wish. Hearing that, my mind suddenly went blank. Things are getting more and more confusing. Previously, I had thought that Emperor Ku was behind everything, but now I knew that Emperor Yan was also involved. In that case, when Uncle Lin told me that this matter had something to do with the ancient war in Medicine King Valley, he wasn't lying. Emperor Ku was a descendant of the Yellow Emperor, so it was possible that the Yellow Emperor was also involved. If the Yellow Emperor and the Flame Emperor were involved, did that mean that Monster Emperor June was also involved? After thinking about it carefully, I realized that since I was the reincarnation of Emperor Ku and Monster Emperor June, if their ultimate goal was to open the mountain and sea realm, there was no need for me to appear. Or perhaps there was no need for me to appear as the reincarnation of Emperor Ku and Monster Emperor June. In that case, the plan of the three people in the ancient war wasn't to open the mountain and sea realm, but something else. However, Tao didn't know about this. Nangong was just like me, Emperor Ku's chess piece, so he didn't know about it either. Uncle Lin only had a vague idea, so he didn't know anything. As such, only the evil spirit was left. All these years, he and Nangong have been assisting me in my growth. When I heard Nangong talk about opening the mountain and sea realm, I thought that the evil spirit was on the side of the monster race. But after thinking about it carefully, I realized that he already knew about my identity. Since he hadn't participated in the monster race's preparations, his goal wasn't to open the mountain and sea realm. In addition to that, I was most curious about why he, a subordinate of the Flame Emperor, would pledge allegiance to Monster Emperor June and instigate the ancient war. Chapter 858. After understanding these things, my eyebrows relaxed. However, according to my understanding of the sacrificial evil spirit, since this matter was of great importance, no matter how much I asked, he wouldn't tell me the details. In other words, I only gained something in meaning, but in reality, I still knew nothing. With that in mind, I didn't continue thinking about it. This matter would eventually be revealed to the world, and I wouldn't have to waste my energy thinking about it. Previously, I had planned to ask Bayan about the death scripture's effects, but now it seemed that she didn't know the key to it. So, I simply put the matter to the back of my mind and enjoyed the hard-won world of just the two of us. One day was really too short. The next day, Bayan got up early to prepare food for me. As I watched her busy figure, I thought about the snake's spirit from yesterday and couldn't help but sigh. If only I could stay with Bayan for a long time. How wonderful would that be? Whenever the word if was mentioned, it could only be an unrealistic expectation. When Bayan finished cooking, we smiled at each other and sat down to eat. We didn't say anything, but we did our best to slow down our movements, wanting to enjoy this hard-won time together. Parting was inevitable. We had experienced it a few times already, so there wasn't much sadness in this moment. At least, Bayan and I didn't have any expressions of sadness on our faces. She calmly stood up with a smile on her face and said that she would watch me leave. Perhaps Bayan's strength had infected me, but my heart felt warm. Even after we left the Fire God Temple, my heart remained calm and my mood didn't fluctuate much. When I turned around and saw the fiery red Fire God Temple behind me, I felt a little apprehensive. Bayan was calm, and so was I. But this was only on the surface. In reality, the opening of the mountain and sea realm was approaching, and it was very likely that this would be the last time I saw Bayan. In fact, I didn't know what this meant, but I couldn't avoid the fear in my heart. When the fire god temple disappeared before me, I forced myself to calm down and didn't stay any longer. I left this place and headed toward Wangwu Grotto Heaven. Just like before, I was still cautious. I completely concealed my aura and covered my surroundings with my spiritual sense. I carefully moved forward to avoid any mishaps. Fortunately, no one seemed to be following me this time. I walked out of the Shenangjia forest without encountering any trouble. After leaving Shenangjia, I rushed to the airport and boarded the flight to Wangwu Heavenly Cave. During the voyage, I didn't have the heart to cultivate. I laid on my seat and couldn't help but think about what Uncle Lin had said. Opening the mountain and sea realm didn't require overwhelming power. All one had to do was gather the 10 great divine items, the 3 keys, and a pair of jade bracelets. I've confirmed this with Nangong before. As for why he wants me to use my free time to practice cultivation, it's all in preparation for when the mountain and sea realm opens. I already knew about these things. In fact, even without Uncle Lin telling me, I was already prepared for it. Right now, I'm thinking about the demonic tribe in the mountain and sea realm. From the moment Nangong gave me the sword, I knew that the mountain and sea realm was a place where the shamans and demons coexisted. Thousands of years had passed, and no one knew exactly what had happened inside. However, based on what had happened in the past, Demon Emperor Jun had led the demon folk into the mountain and sea realm. The fact that he had been able to force Shenong to commit suicide proved that the demon folk were incredibly powerful. Now that it was open again, the most likely scenario was that the demon folk had come out to wreak havoc in the mortal world. At that time, great waves would surely rise between the human and demon tribes. To Nangong and Bayan, opening the mountain and sea realm and searching for the shamans was extremely important. As for the demon folk like the Green Hill clan and the Lu clan, it was the same. As for Patriarch Li, Celestial Master Zhang, and the other experts with exceedingly high cultivation bases, they were all looking forward to the opening of the mountain and sea realm. As for me, the opening of the mountain and sea realm didn't have much meaning. The only meaning I had was worry. I had to worry about what the mountain and sea realm would bring to the human world. I had been worried about this issue for a long time, and when I asked Nangong about it, he said that if the demon folk appeared, the humans would be able to drive them away a second time. However, the reality was that the human world was no longer the same as it had been all those years ago, when Yin and Huang were divided and ruled. Living beings didn't exist solely for the purpose of cultivation. In fact, most people didn't even know that the path of cultivation existed. Therefore, the conflict between the humans and the demons had long since been buried in the river of history. If we wanted to start again, it would be far more difficult than the first time. The more I thought about it, the heavier my heart became. At the same time, my resistance to the matter grew clearer. When Nangong mentioned it earlier, I didn't immediately reject his decision because I wasn't sure how things would play out in the end. Now that I knew what the consequences would be, I knew that even if I spoke up against it, it would be useless. Nangong had been planning for this for thousands of years, and it wasn't something that I could persuade him with a few words. Before I knew it, I had found myself standing in opposition to Nangong. As for the Xian, Taoist, and Buddhist sects, as well as the demon folk, their ultimate goal was to open the mountain and sea realm. Therefore, they were on the same side as Nangong. Even Wang Can, as well as all the other blessed lands and paradises, had the same interests. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but smile wryly. At this time, the plane started to land. I smiled wryly and put the matter aside for the time being. After the plane landed, I left the airport and went to Mount Wanwu. On the way, I used a sound-transmitting talisman to contact Wang Ken and told him that I was going to go there immediately. When I arrived at the mountain pass, Officer Wang was already waiting for me with his clansmen. When they saw me, Wang Can and the other members of the Wangwu heavenly abode knelt and respectfully greeted me. I was already familiar with this scene, but now I was stunned. I suddenly realized that if I stopped Nangong from opening the mountain and sea realm, The people of the Nine Cauldron clan wouldn't recognize me. I couldn't help but feel ridiculous. One could seem to notice that I was in a daze, so he didn't mind offending me. He stood up and approached me, asking, "What's the matter?" His words pulled me out of my thoughts. I waved my hand, but didn't say anything. Then I asked the kneeling people to stand up. Since I didn't want to tell him, Wonkin didn't ask further. He just followed me carefully. After a while, we arrived at the Wangwu heavenly abode. I didn't hurry to Wang Kan's father's mansion. Instead, I asked Wangkin about Mi Tai's situation. Speaking of which, I wasn't qualified to be his master. It had been a year since I'd left Mi Tai here, but I hadn't asked him about his situation. Wangkin smiled when he heard my question. Then, he told me that after I'd left, he'd arranged for Mi Tai to stay in his father's mansion and use the formations there to cultivate. Over the past year or so, it was rare to see him. Even his meals were delivered to his door every day. However, a few days ago, there was a strange phenomenon in the sky above the mansion. Heavenly lightning appeared. I was startled. Mi Tai had become a heavenly seal, heavenly master. When I first met him, I thought that he wasn't suitable for cultivation. I hadn't expected that when I returned to the Mi family's manor, he would have a Shuriao cultivation base. Now, in just over a year, he had become a heavenly seal, heavenly master. Compared to him, it had taken me 10 years to obtain the dragon seal. His cultivation talent was really amazing. Of course, talent was only one aspect. Mi Tai's cultivation base could reach his current level not only because of his talent and his desire to cultivate, but also because of the formation in Wang Kan's father's mansion, which provided him with abundant shaman energy. That's not the only reason. During the past year, I've had the feeling that something has changed in the world. It's not just Mi Tai. Even I can sense that my cultivation is progressing much faster than before. It's almost as if the mountain and sea realm is opening up. Something has changed without me even realizing it. Of course, it was just a vague feeling. I couldn't tell what it was exactly. While talking about Mi Tai's situation, I planned to visit him. However, Officer Wang told me that he had prepared a banquet to welcome me. Since he was so kind, I couldn't refuse. I nodded and decided to go to the banquet first. Soon after, we arrived at a palace. This palace was where the banquet had been held at the heavenly grand ritual. I remembered Wang Kan mentioning that unless there was something important, he wouldn't hold a banquet here. Except for the heavenly grand ritual, Wang Kan had never held a banquet here. Given my status, it was normal for Wang Kan to hold a banquet here. However, it made me feel like I was an outsider. So, after thinking about it for a while, I realized that Wang Kan had held a banquet here to welcome me. That was the truth. I called Wang Kan and asked him about it. He told me that another distinguished guest had come today. He was also a member of the Witch Clan. According to him, he had come to discuss important matters. The Witch Clan? I subconsciously asked, "Do I know this person?" Wang Kan shook his head. "This is the first time I've seen this person. I don't know if I know him or not. However, this person isn't from the Nine Cauldrons clan, and he doesn't seem to have any clansmen. However, he's strong, so I don't dare to treat him lightly." After saying that, he asked me not to blame him. After listening to him, I started to ponder. When I heard that a member of the Witch Clan had come, I instinctively thought that it was the evil, sacrificial spirit. However, Wang Kan said that he didn't know this person, so I dismissed this possibility. I had heard from Nangong that apart from the Nine Cauldrons clan and the Medicine King Valley, there were no members of the Witch Clan in this world. This Wangwu Grotto Heaven was a secluded place. Since this person could find this place, could be Nangong? With that thought in mind, I quickened my pace and walked toward the inner hall. As soon as I entered the door, I saw a man standing with his hands clasped behind his back. That man's figure was really familiar. I recognized him at first glance and called his name. "Nangong, why are you here?" Hearing my call, Nangong leisurely turned around and looked at me with a smile. "I came to discuss some matters with this junior. I didn't expect to meet you here." "Unexpected? I don't think so. When I was talking to Uncle Lin in the Medicine King Valley, I already had a guess. Uncle Lin had always stayed in his hometown and didn't go out. Even if he always paid attention to the mountain and sea realms affairs, he couldn't be like Nangong, who knew everything. However, when he called me out, he told me to leave the Medicine King Valley and find a place to cultivate in peace. Uncle Lin had never cared about my affairs, so it was strange for him to say something like that, unless someone had specifically told him about it or asked him to do something. As far as I knew, only the evil sacrificial spirit in Nan Gong could do something like that. However, according to the arrogant and aloof nature of the evil sacrificial spirit, he wouldn't let others help him. After thinking about it carefully, I realized that Nan Gong was the only one who could do that. Therefore, Nan Gong's words sounded like he was playing with me. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.